Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. Tonight we have 11 stories in total. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 500 likes on this one. It only takes just a quick second to drop a like, and it helps out the channel immensely. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I post videos just like this one every Monday night, and I'd love to have you here. This past week has been pretty cold out, so I've mostly just been in my bedroom playing Baldur's Gate 3 and making this video. I'm already starting to feel the what am I going to do with my life when I finish Baldur's Gate 3 feeling. So I wanted to ask all of you, what games are all of you currently playing? And if you're not currently playing anything, what's the last one that you really enjoyed? I'm looking for more games to check out. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. This happened to me a few years ago. My therapist says it helps to tell people about traumatic events. Something like getting it off my chest. I don't go outside all that often anymore, and I don't talk to all that many people, so I figure this is the next best thing. Take it as a cautionary tale. If you've ever worked retail, I'm sure you can relate to this experience at least at some level. I had a coworker who had absolutely no concept of personal space. At the time, I was a student and worked at a local grocery store. The way this company works is that each employee rotates jobs on a set schedule. So for a few hours in the shift, you'll be at the register. The next, you'll stock aisles, so on and so on. My apartment was in a city on the eastern coast of the United States, a mere 2-minute drive from my work. It was a nice setup, classes in the morning and work in the afternoon. But if I am being entirely honest, my coworkers could get under my skin at times. They were relatively nice people, but they were the type who would avoid work like the plague, and leave most of it to me while attempting to appear busy to our manager. Still, outside of the occasional misogynistic comment and the extra work, it wasn't so bad. But one of my coworkers in particular, Trevor, would not leave me alone. Like I mentioned earlier, we had all set jobs per shift, yet for hours at a time he would come pester me, talking on and on about whatever topic he chose that day. Usually it was about his girlfriend, about the renovations he was making to his new house, or what he did over the weekend. Don't get me wrong, I don't mind chatting. I don't mean to come across as an insensitive jerk who was too arrogant to make friends. His talking would last entire shifts without pause. It impeded my work. I would give him hints, social cues, and try to dismiss him as politely as I could. But it was like pebbles bouncing off of a brick wall. Nothing got through to him. More than once a manager would pass us by and scold both of us for slacking because he wasn't at his designated job. I did explain this to the managers, and it provided a temporary solution. They talked to him privately and gave him a warning. From now on, he would need to stay at his position for the duration of his shift. I was happy too that this freed me from his endless chatting, while also making it seem like the issue was only his lack of work, and not my annoyance and discomfort. Looking back, I almost wish I had just endured his chatting. This new enforced separation between us caused him to escalate. Now he would wait for me to take my lunch so he could sit by me. Again, uncomfortably close to the point where I could smell his breath. This was some months after I first started working here, and he had ramped up his advances. A favorite topic of conversation for him was how he feels disconnected with his girlfriend, how she acted immature, and how he wished she was more mature, as per his own words, like me. He would make comparisons between me and her, and talk about how great I was. He began to ask me to spend time together outside of work. Again, I do not want to come across as some snob who thought I was too good to make friends with him. I feel it's pretty obvious he had motives outside of friendship anyways. I really wasn't interested, and I gave a lame excuse every time he asked to hang out over a weekend. Usually something like I had to study for an exam or do homework. Eventually he picked up on the hint, but he took it the exact wrong way. Instead of dropping it and giving up, he adopted a tone of spiteful guilt tripping, which he would disguise as pointed jokes. For example, if I told him I was busy, he would say something like, "Still trying to avoid me? You sure seem to have a lot of homework. What class is it in?" He'd try to catch me in white lies or make me feel guilty about declining. And sure, maybe it was dumb to lie at all. Maybe I should have just told him to go away. But I wanted this to end neatly for everyone so that my job wouldn't be even more uncomfortable than it already was. I guess I was hoping he would just give up. Again, it did become worse. He began to tell me about parts of his past, deep, personal parts that should only be shared with people you are close to. For example, one day on break, completely unprompted, he began to talk to me about how he used to be an alcoholic, how he was suicidal, and how he nearly took his own life multiple times. I had no idea how to respond outside of giving cheap and, frankly, unenthusiastic sympathies. I was beyond uncomfortable, mostly because I felt like he was trying to scare me and guilt me into something I didn't want. As in, do what I want, or maybe I'll hurt myself and it'll be your fault. I'm sorry to say it almost worked. For those of you who may think I neglected a person in need who was reaching out for help, understand that this man has been in a relationship with his girlfriend for 2 years and talks to me all the time about his family who he lives with. He has many people to support him who aren't just co-workers. It's important I give a bit of context about his living situation. As I mentioned, he bought a new house recently at the time. He was renovating it while still living with his parents until he was ready to either move into it or rent it out. While I'm at it, I'll explain mine to you as well. It'll be relevant in a little bit. My street turns off into a corridor of garages. It's how I and the other tenants who live here enter our apartments. The garage is separate from the living area and is divided by a small outdoor concrete courtyard. I keep my grill here. The door to my house from this courtyard is a glass sliding door. At this point, I had endured enough of what I considered to be Trevor's emotional manipulation. I sent an email to HR complaining about Trevor and the unprofessional things he had done. The next week, I didn't see Trevor at the start of his shift. I did, however, see his car in the parking lot on my way in. When I clocked out, he was waiting for me by my car. I dreaded this conversation. I was sure HR had fired him. Did they mention my name to him? Was he going to do something extreme? But he simply explained to me that he had moved to another store location. He seemed bitter and angry. He asked for my number with venom in his tone. He almost demanded it. I didn't want to lie anymore. I was so ready for this all to be over and done with. I thought just one last step, and my life would be normal again. I told him no, flat out. I told him I thought he was a fine person. I was glad to have chatted with him during our time working together, and I didn't want our relationship to carry on beyond work. His face fell flat, like air leaving a punctured tire. I waited for a response. I was expecting insults, yelling, screaming, crying, maybe even a slap, but no, nothing like that. He told me, "I just want to show you our house." I didn't know what he meant, but I knew I was done with this conversation, so I wished him the best of luck, told him goodbye, and got in my car. As I was driving out of the parking lot, I could see him staring at the back of my car from my rearview mirror. I watched his unmoving form until it wasn't visible anymore. I breathed out a sigh that carried tension I didn't know I had. I felt like a weight had lifted off my back. No more Trevor. No more awkward conversations or trying to tiptoe around his brazen advances. No more trying to convince him of how his girlfriend was every bit as good as I was. I could just work and go home without any worry of stress. I was honestly naive to think it would end here. I wish I had just taken it more seriously, reported him to someone. I don't know who. For the next 2 weeks, life was great. I went to class, the gym, work, and home without any unexpected stress. On the 3rd week, I saw Trevor's car in the parking lot of my school. But there are plenty of the same types of cars on the road, right? It couldn't be him, and yet I recognized the dent on the front bumper. I looked around, dread setting in, but he was nowhere to be found. I cautiously went about my morning as usual. When I returned to the parking lot, his car was gone. Maybe he had enrolled and was taking classes. Who knows? It was arrogant to make it about me. At least, so I told myself. A week later, I saw him at my gym. I was on the stair stepper when I saw him across the room on a bench press facing my side. I am not one to insult newcomers, but he clearly had no idea what he was doing. He didn't approach, but I felt his eyes on me. I ended my workout early and went home. I became paranoid at this point. I would feel his eyes on me when I was alone. I would jump at the smallest sound. I stopped going out as often. I even switched gyms and took a week off from classes. I talked to my friends about it and they told me I was being crazy. So he was taking classes at my college. It was that strange. He was in his late 20s. People go to community college at any age, and the gym is a public space. It's the nearest to both of us. Surely it was a coincidence. I shouldn't judge him for trying to improve himself. Their rationalizations didn't help me the night I caught his reflection in the sliding door, watching me as I struggled to unlock it after my shift. I spun on my heels, my vision tunneling in panic, but he wasn't there. I called the cops. They were reluctant at best, lazy and annoyed at worst. They assured me all is well and to call them if I saw anything again. I drove to a parking lot, made sure there were plenty of cameras and people nearby, and slept in my car. Tried to, rather. I couldn't stop looking out the windows and double-checking to make sure my doors were locked. When the sun rose, I called a friend of mine to check out my apartment with me. When we were sure it was empty, I finally felt just barely comfortable enough to be alone there. Luckily, before my friend left, I found it. When I saw it, my skin turned cold and clammy, and nausea rose in my throat. There, tucked under my pillow, was a photo. It was of Trevor and his girlfriend, but her head had been scratched out with something sharp. In its place was a picture of me, my face, eyes closed, fast asleep. I went straight to the police with it, but it was again pointless. According to them, the photo proved nothing. It could be easily faked. A photo wasn't enough to arrest someone. At this point, I was terrified most of the time. I constantly looked over my shoulder. I searched my house daily for I don't even know what. Cameras, more photos, anything. I had begun looking for other places to live. I was planning to end my lease early and leave town as soon as possible. Trevor was going to do something to me. I could feel it. I had been living at my mother's house during my search for another apartment. I let myself fall into a sense of security. I felt that nothing could happen to me in my own mom's house. And as the weeks went by without incident, I began to think maybe it was over. Maybe Trevor had moved on. Maybe he'd gotten bored with me. I underestimated his insanity. At my job, they offer employees free bottles of water. There are 2 fridges, one in the front of the store and one in the back, that you can grab water from at any time. I didn't even think about it. It was just habit. It was a Wednesday. The day was particularly slow and a handful of people had called out sick. I still wonder if Trevor had somehow planned that. Maybe I attribute too much power to him in my fear and hatred. I was closing that day, and I was a bit out of it already. The whole situation had been so stressful and school kept piling on. I just needed space to breathe. It made me vulnerable. I remember grabbing a bottle of water from the back about half an hour before I planned on leaving. I finished about half of it, went through the procedure of closing the store and locked up. My head was spinning. The world air felt like molasses. Time slowed down. The last thing I remember seeing was a familiar red car with a dent on the bumper. I woke up in a wooden chair. The air smelled like drywall and concrete powder. My hands and legs were tied up to the chair. My screams were muffled by a dirty rag. To my disgust, I recognized the smell of sweat on them. It was one of Trevor's shirts. I looked around the room, trying to catch my bearings and maybe see if I could do anything about my situation. Honestly, I almost wish I hadn't. The walls were gray and unfinished, but I could hardly see it behind the mass of photos covering its rough surface. Photos of me at the gym, at work, in class from the perspective of the window, in my apartment, in my bed. I'd started to cry at this point, and I could taste my own stomach acid bubbling up from my throat. I had become lucid enough to make out singing. Trevor was singing somewhere in the house. It was Frank Sinatra's "I've Got You Under My Skin." I will never listen to that song again as long as I live. Tied up in that place, the lyrics of the song sounded like death threats. Trevor came into the room after a while. He was smiling at me, not smug or threatening. He looked at me as if we had been dating for years. He kissed my forehead. I wanted to stop existing. He told me that he'd been planning this for a long time. He kept talking about how I had been confused, how he had been planning our lives together, preparing our home for when I was ready to be with him. He picked a handful of photos from the wall. They seemed as if they'd been touched more than the others. I don't know how to describe a photo as well used, but that's the best I can do, is they looked worn out. He showed them to me. More poor edits or cutouts of him and I together. One of them had me in a wedding dress. Whether or not he could sense my terror or disgust, I don't know, but my lack of enthusiasm didn't seem to please him. His face soured. He began insulting me. I won't repeat what he said verbatim, but his point was that I was ungrateful. He said he would treat me right and be the perfect partner, and I was too stupid to give him a chance. His anger grew to the point of rage, and I really believed he would end my life at any moment. But as soon as it had come, his rage subsided. His smile came back, and he said he forgave me. He told me I was still confused because of my friends and family. He said I would thank him one day for, according to him, saving me from them. He kept calling me pet names which sent chills down my spine. In truth, his insane obsession probably helped to spare me. Had he been an outright killer, I wouldn't be typing this now. That being said, it's hard for me to honestly say that what happened was a preferable alternative to dying. He kept me down there for what felt like a long time. I learned later it was just over 2 weeks. I won't go into detail about all the things he did to me. I'm sure you already know regardless. I know I said I'm trying to get things off my chest in this post, but some things I can't bring myself to relive. I was easy to find, luckily. I had made a big deal of Trevor to my work, to the police, to my mother and my friends. When I went missing, he was the first suspect. The day the police knocked on his door, I was more afraid than ever. If he thought his plans with me were at an end, this delusion of a future with me, I have no doubt he would have killed me and himself. In his mind, I'm sure it would be romantic. He opened the door to the 2 officers who began to speak to him. I was weak, dehydrated, and malnourished, but I put every ounce of energy I had into screaming through the filthy shirt he used to gag me. I heard their conversation pause, then I heard footsteps. Quick, heavy steps. He was running towards my room. The door swung open violently. It was Trevor. I can't say for sure what he was doing. He wasn't armed, at least. He took a step towards me, but was quickly stopped by an officer's taser. He collapsed and the officer was on him in an instant, cuffing his hands behind his back. Trevor was crying. He was begging them to let him keep me. He kept asking me to tell them that I loved him too. The other officer untied me and took the shirt out of my mouth. I collapsed into her and sobbed until I couldn't anymore. They took Trevor away in the back of a cruiser. I never saw him again. But that doesn't mean the story had a happy ending. I mean, I lived, which I am truly grateful for, but I can't see myself ever healing from this. I still find myself double-checking my room before I sleep. I still wake up at night in a cold sweat. I still feel panic whenever I see a car the same make and color as Trevor's. Obviously, this has marred my social and romantic life. It's been several years since then, and I can't stand to be touched by anyone. Sometimes, I can't help but feel like Trevor still won, like he still has power over me, even though I know he's locked away. I can only hope that I'll learn to cope with what happened one day. I graduated not long after and moved cities. My life has been going well, or at least as well as it can be. I took up therapy, like I mentioned at the beginning, but it's a slow process. I guess all I can do is my best. I appreciate you reading my story, if you did make it this far. Like I said, take it as a cautionary tale. There are some twisted people out there, and you never know what someone is capable of. Don't take half measures when it comes to your own safety. If you have a bad feeling about someone, please just play it safe. I only wish I could have told myself that back when I had the chance. The maelstrom's fury rode the black swells of the North Sea like something cursed. The sky hung low and rotted, a bruise of cloud and spray, and the wind keened through the rigging like a thing bereft. I'd worked the docks long enough to know the sea's moods, but this was different. The water heaved and seethed, cold as a grave, and the rain came slantwise, needled and relentless, harrowing our faces raw. We dragged the nets for hours, the steel doors clawing the seabed, the boat shuddering like a dying beast as it hauled its burden. Cod and haddock thrashed in the mesh, their eyes dull coins, their gills gasping the poisoned air. The stench of them was the smell of salt and rot, and the iron reek of blood gone old. Josh stood at the stern ramp, his silhouette cut sharp against the gray void. Time and the sea had worked him into something gnarled and unyielding, his face a web of fissures, his hands like tarred rope. He spat into the churn and barked my name. "Aiden, get down here." The deck pitched underfoot as I clambered to him, the boards slick with gurry and rain. The winch screamed like a thing in pain, its gears grinding as the net breached the surface. It writhed there, bloated with fish and weed and darker things, the cables groaning under the weight. Josh gripped the net's edge, his knuckles bone white, and I took my place beside him. "Better be worth the fight," he muttered, though the sea stole half his words. We hauled. The net bled seawater, icy and foul, and the catch spilled onto the deck in a slithering mass. Cod twisted and slapped, their scales catching the weak light with shards of bone. But there was more. Tangles of kelp black as rot, stones crusted with barnacles that clicked like teeth, and deeper something else, a tumorous mass, black and glabrous, swelling and contracting like a drowned lung, ribbed with veins that burned a cold cerulean, their light leaching into the scales of dying fish, turning them spectral. The thing breathed, or seemed to, a wet rhythm that matched no living thing we knew. I stepped back. my boots slipping in the offal. Josh stood carved from salt-bleached wood, his knife hand trembling. "What is that?" I said. "Hell if I know," he said. Josh crouched but did not touch the thing, the blue light carving gullies in his weathered face. Captain Reed's boots stuck the deck like gunshots, pipe clenched between tombstone teeth. The sea had taken his left eye years back, the remaining one a shard of flint. "What's here?" he said. Josh lifted both shoulders. I stared at the thing. The captain leaned in, his shadow fell across the thing, and for a breath it pulsed brighter, veins throbbing like live wires under skin. 30 years, the captain muttered. 30 years, and I ain't never seen no god-forsaken thing like this before. Jake came laughing until he wasn't, rag hanging limp from grease-black fingers. "That could be treasure," he said. His voice cracked like a boy's. Tom emerged, squinting into the spray. "Christ and all saints," Tom whispered. Alexei followed, hands red with engine blood. He froze mid-wipe, cussing in Russian. The deck swayed, then the thing hummed. Not sound, but vibration. A teeth-rattling drone that climbed from gut to skull. Tom backed toward the galley, eyes white-rimmed. Jake knelt near the thing. The light pooled in his pupils, twin moons in a starless sky. "Wow," Jake said. His hand floated toward the mass. Captain Reed moved faster than a man his years should. "Don't touch it," he commanded. Metal screamed. The winch shuddered, cable snapping taut. The Fury listed hard, deck tilting like a coffin lid. Men scrambled. I fell against the rail, salt blood in my mouth. The mass glowed nuclear now, veins spidering across its flesh, the hum a scalpel in the brain. Jake stared slack-jawed, drool glistening. Tom's scream pierced the din as he vanished below. Alexei roared in the tongue of drowned men. Then silence. The light died, the hum stillborn. Reed stood carved from shipwreck timber. The silence after the hum was worse. A thick, clodding quiet that pressed against the eardrums like deep water. My skull throbbed, and the afterbirth of pain, a dull auger, boring behind the eyes. I gripped the rail, the iron biting into my palms, and spat blood-flecked phlegm into the seethe below. Josh knelt in the gore, his face the color of gutted cod's belly, lips peeling back from yellowed teeth as he whispered half-words to whatever god still listened. "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee." The prayer of a man who'd long since traded faith for survival. Jake hadn't moved. Still he crouched by the mass, his spine bent like a question mark. Drool pooled beneath his chin, catching the weak light like diesel spill. His eyes were opened wide, the pupils dilated to black pits. The dead blue glow lived there still, though the mass lay dormant, as if the thing had poured part of itself into him, left its poison simmering behind those vacant mirrors. "Jake," I croaked, "get the hell back." Nothing. His hands hovered inches from the mass, fingers twitching as though plucking something invisible. Reed moved sudden, a storm front in oilskins, grabbed Jake's collar and wrenched him backward. Jake spun wild, all elbows and teeth, and drove his fist into the captain's face. Reed staggered, blood sheeting down his chin, but Jake was already lunging for the mass again. Reed hooked an ankle, sent him sprawling. Jake's temple struck the deck with a sound like a mallet splitting green wood. He lay still. A dark rose of blood bloomed beneath his skull. Then a shudder, a rattling inhale. Jake sat up slow, head lolling on a ruined neck. Blood painted his cheek in arabesques. He stared at Reed without recognition, without malice. He seemed to stare through him. Reed hissed through crimson teeth. The fear in his sea-milked eye was worse than the blood, a primal understanding, the look of a wolf that smells its own mortality. Alexei materialized from the engine stink, wiping his hands on a rag gone stiff with grease. "Captain," he said, the vowels heavy with the Volga's frost. "If we throw it back, what if something worse happens? What if it answers?" Reed stared at Jake for a while, then studied the mass. It pulsed once, faint, like a heart in a butcher's bucket. "Ain't about answers," he said. "It's about what's asking." Tom emerged from below decks, skin the gray of weak old corpse flesh. His eyes darted animal-like, whites showing all around. He crossed himself 3 times, thumb carving shaky sigils. "It's cursed, Caps," he whispered. "Cursed, cursed, cursed." Josh swayed against the rail, one hand pressed to his gut. "It ain't cursed. It's some lab experiment," he slurred. "Kelp and jellyfish is all." "Why it breathes, then?" Alexei's voice cut cold. "Why it put its teeth in our heads?" Jake began to laugh. Not laughter exactly, a ruptured wheeze, air forced through broken bellows. He stood, movements jerky. The wound on his head wept freely. "Y'all scared?" he rasped. The grin splitting his face belonged to something that had never learned human shapes. "All you rotten meat stacks, think it'll kill you?" He turned toward the mass, arms spread crucifix wide. "It don't want to kill you, don't you see?" His fingers grazed the surface. Jake's eyes had been that dead blue sheen since the thing touched him. Glass orbs lit from within, the pupils blown wide as a shark's. But when he rose, we understood it was worse. His grin split his face like a poorly stitched wound, lips stretching until the corners cracked and bled. He moved toward Josh with the languid menace of a thing unspooled from its bones. "Jake?" My voice died in the salt air. Josh backed against the rail, hands raised in the universal plea of prey. Jake grabbed Josh's head and struck it against the railing. Josh's skull met the railing with a wet clang. Again, again, again. The metal sang its awful hymn. Blood sprayed in arc patterns, blackened the falling light. Josh's body sagged, limp as a gutted sail, but Jake kept swinging the ruined head like a clapper in a bell. Again, again, and again. We were statues, salt-crusted and hollow. When he turned on us, it was with the precision of slaughterhouse machinery. Alexei raised greased hands in defense, but it was too late. Jake's fist cratered the Russian's throat, cartilage collapsing like rotted mastwood. Alexei folded, drowning on his own blood, while Jake pivoted toward Tom. Tom ran. Jake moved like current, fast and depthless, snatching Tom's ankle mid-stride. Tom screamed as Jake dragged him back, fingernails scraping grooves in the rusted iron. Reed charged then, a pipe raised high, but Jake sidestepped with eel grace. The captain's weapon struck empty air. Jake's counterblow dropped the captain like a gaffed marlin. I ran. Jake's laughter chased me, a sound like rigging torn in a gale. The storage door loomed, pitted steel smeared with fish guts. I barricaded myself inside among crates of rusted hooks and frayed netting. The dark stank of brine and diesel. I heard someone groaning. Not human, not animal. I peered through the salt-caked window. Josh shuffled toward me. What remained of him? His skull a shattered eggshell, brain matter glistening in the crevices, clouded eyes milky as a dead squid's. The thing inside his corpse moved all wrong, joints bending backward, fingers clawing air in pulsed jerks. The dead were all rising. I scavenged the crates with numb hands, a flare gun crusted with barnacles, a life jacket gone green with mold. The door hinges screamed as I shouldered into the maelstrom. Jake stood silhouetted against the roiling sky, his laughter now a ceaseless drone. The others lurched behind him, Reed dragging a shattered log, Tom crawling on stumps of elbows, Alexi's head lolling from a spine snapped clean. Their eyes burned with that same cursed blue. I fired the flare. A comet's tail of phosphorus red lit the slaughterhouse deck. Jake turned, his grin splitting wider, and in that hellish glow I saw the truth. The thing inside him, inside all of them, pulsing like a nest of eels under their skin. The life jacket clung to me like a dead man's embrace as I vaulted the rail. The black water opened its maw. The sea stretched endless and gray, a roiling purgatory of water and sky. The maelstrom's fury lay hull down on the horizon, a blackened tooth jutting from the maw of the deep. The life jacket bit into my ribs, its buoyancy a meager blasphemy against the hunger of the waves. My legs hung numb in the gelid water. Dead things trailing in the current. Salt crusted my lips, blood blooming where the skin split. Hours had passed since I'd plunged into the void. Time held no purchase here, only the living and the not. Movement flickered on the Fury's distant deck. Figures lurched along the rail, marionette-limbed and wrong. Josh, Alexi, Reed, their bodies bent at angles no spine should allow, skin luminous with that same gangrenous blue that had rotted through our world. They paused as one, heads swiveling towards some silent command. They then hurled themselves overboard. Bodies struck the water with fleshy detonations. They thrashed toward me in that distant horizon, limbs churning the brine to froth, glowing like drowned stars. No cries, no breaths, only that terrible purpose. The sea claimed them greedily. Reed sank last, his milky eye fixed on me even as the dark closed over his head. Night fell. The stars blinked cold and indifferent. My gut cramped, emptiness gnawing at itself. Thirst sandpapered my throat. To drink the sea was to court death, but death kept closer company now, his breath on my neck. Dawn came leprous and pale. I raised blistered hands against the light, scanning the horizon for ships, planes, gods. Nothing but the gray forever. The life jacket chafed raw flesh. My legs had gone beyond pain to some mute abstraction of self. On the second day the driftwood came, a spar from some lost vessel, barnacled and reeking of rot. I clung to it, fingers finding purchase in the worm-riddled grain. It buoyed me when the squalls came, wind screaming like the damned. I did not think of what moved beneath, the things that wore familiar faces, their bones lit from within by that eldritch blue. The third day unspooled in fevered ribbons, sun like a white-hot brand. Nightmares swam just beneath waking, pale faces ballooning from the depths, mouths gasping soundless curses. I bit my arm to stay conscious. Sleep promised darker things, cold tendrils coiling around ankles, glowing veins threading through black water. On the fourth day I saw a smudge on the horizon, white against gray, not ship nor raft, but something moving. My heart stuttered. I raised arms heavy as anvils, croaking a prayer through cracked lips. The sound died in the wind. The speck grew. I waved until my shoulders screamed. The ember in my chest guttered. The speck swelled in the gray waste. Not ship, nor savior. A figure. I let my arms fall. It moved as no man moves, spine undulating like an eel's, limbs jerking in marionette spasms, yet cutting the waves with shark's intent. The wind brought sounds now, not laughter, but the creak of waterlogged timbers, the suck of tide pools, emptying of life. Closer. No. The word a rusted nail in my throat. No, 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 no. It halted 10 fathoms off, buoyed by the swells. Jake, or what the sea had regurgitated, his face bloated to translucence, veins mapping blue ruin beneath skin like drowned parchment, eyes like foxfire in a ship's corpse, the same cursed radiance seeping from their sockets. His grin split the putrid flesh of his cheeks, a rictus of needle teeth too numerous, too sharp. Kelp threaded through his hair. Crabs scuttled in the ruin of his oilskin coat. Found you? The voice wet and resonant, vibrating in the mastoid bone. Why'd you run, brother? I scrabbled backward, dead limbs flailing. The driftwood slipped away, claimed by the hungering deep. Jake's laughter rose, not sound but pressure, the whine of stressed hull plates before the breach. He drifted nearer. The stench of him enveloped me, low-tide rot, petroleum, things festering in lightless trenches. His jaw unhinged, widening beyond human limits, the maw a black pit stippled with barnacle clusters. Ain't no elsewhere, he crooned, salt water dripping from his tongue. But down. His hand breached the surface, fingers fused into a single slick appendage, blackened and webbed, glistening with primal mucus. It hovered before my face. I tasted copper, bile, the sweet decay of hope. The talon traced a cold parabola an inch from my eye. Not yet, he breathed. The words vibrated in my teeth. Soon. He sank, slowly, deliberate, eyes never leaving mine. The water embraced him, a lover's caress. The last I saw was that grin, stretched eternal, before the dark of the water took him. The laughter welled up from below, a subsonic thrum that stirred the water into whirlpools. I clung to the life jacket. The horizon bled into void. The sea watched with a billion glass eyes. The sea kept me long after they pulled me from its maw, days uncounted, nights without stars. The trawler emerged from the gray like a fever dream, rusted hull bleeding orange corrosion, nets hanging slack as gallows rope. I raised arms, gone to stone. Mouthing pleas my throat could no longer shape. Help me. Men moved on her decks, shadows against a bleached sky. Their shouts carried across the chop, crude music to a drowning man's ear. A lifeboat kissed the waves, oars rising and falling like the wings of some great seabird damned to skim the surface forever. The water clung to my legs as they hauled me aboard, cold fingers trailing up my calves. I did not look down, did not dare. Rough hands swaddled me in wool that reeked of another man's sweat. Their voices reached me through fathoms of static. Easy now, lad. Christ alive, look at him. Get the kettle on. I stared at the planks beneath my boots, watched seawater weep through the cracks. Some part of me still floated there, adrift between worlds. Engine vibrations thrummed in my marrow as they bore me below decks to a cabin no larger than a coffin. Diesel fumes coiled in the air, thick enough to chew. A mug appeared in my hands, stained tin, liquid black as bilge. I drank. The heat scalded a path to my gut, but left the deeper cold untouched. Lucky. The speaker loomed in the doorway, backlit by sickly yellow bulbs, a face carved from wind and whiskey, eyes the color of the North Sea fog. Another tide and you'd have been crab meat. I nodded. My tongue lay dead in my mouth. Questions came in shifts, men with fishhook scars and breath like rotting kelp. What ship? How many lost? Storm? Collision? I gave them corpse answers, dry facts stripped of blood and truth. Told of rogue waves, raging squalls, equipment torn loose in the frenzy. They wrote it down in water-stained logbooks, nodding sagely. Sailor superstitions kept their tongues still. No one asked about the marks on my arm, livid grooves where the life jacket straps had bitten to bone. The city of Aberdeen, on Scotland's North Sea coast, rose from the horizon. The docks teemed with gulls and graveyard shift workers, their faces gray under sodium lights. They put me in a white room that reeked of antiseptic lies. Doctors prodded my waterlogged flesh, spoke of exposure, shock, survivor's guilt. Police came with notebooks and narrowed eyes. I led them the same carcass story, watching their pens scratch away the truth. Reporters clustered outside like lampreys. Flashbulbs popped. Miracle survivor, their headlines would scream. They don't know the real story, the thing that breathed in the hold, the crew that walked into the deep. Jake's grin splitting wider with every retelling behind my eyelids. Nights were worse. The hospital bed became a raft adrift on a black ocean. Glowing veins pulsed in the walls. Salt water dripped from ceiling tiles. Always the laughter, wet and resonant. I'd wake choking on imaginary brine, fingers clawing at phantom kelp. They discharged me with pills and pity. I took a room above a dockside tavern where the windows rattled with every freighter's horn. The walls wept condensation. The mattress sagged like a drowned thing. I bought whiskey by the chase, chasing warmth that always receded. Sometimes I'd stand at the window watching trawlers come and go. Their crews laughed on the docks, voices carrying up through the salt-rotten boards. Young men, foolish men, ignorant men. I'd press palms to glass and wonder which would next feed the hungering deep. The nightmares never stopped. Jake waited in them, not as they'd found him, bloated and barnacled, but as he'd been in those last moments. The wrongness of his movement, the wet clicks of his joints. Soon he'd whisper through needle teeth, and I'd wake with the taste of crude oil on my tongue. Autumn came. The sea turned the color of gunmetal. I took to walking the docks at twilight. Past gutting tables, crusted with fish scales. Past nets hung like flayed skins. Sailors stared when I passed. They knew, not the truth, but the stench of it. That maritime's sixth sense, warning of cursed men. One evening I found myself before the Fury's berth. Her replacement rode heavy in the slip. A factory trawler named Atlantic's Bounty. Crewmen hosed down decks still glistening with viscera. I stared until my eyes burned. A mate spotted me, made the sign of the horns behind his back. I fled to my room, drank until the walls blurred. Outside, foghorns moaned their dirges. The laughter began at moonless midnight. Not memory, not dream. It rose from the harbor floor, bubbling through black water, vibrating in the pipes. I pressed hands to ears. Useless. It was inside, same as the cold, same as the rot. I went to the window. The docks lay empty under sickly yellow lamps. Ripples spread through the dark water, concentric rings expanding toward my building, toward me. Something broke the surface. A fin, a hand. The laughter crested, drowning out the gulls, the ships, the feeble human sounds of the waking world. I reached for the whiskey, and the sea reached back. I know I shouldn't be writing this. I should be running, but my legs are trembling so badly I can barely stand. My hands are slick with sweat, making the keys slippery as I type. My phone is at 3% and I need someone, anyone to read this before it dies. This started 3 days ago. I was coming home from my night shift at the hospital. I'm a nurse. Long hours, little sleep. I've always brushed off the weird stuff. Flickering lights, cold spots, probably just my sleep-deprived brain, but that night was different. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw the living room light was on. I was sure I'd turned it off before leaving. Still, I figured maybe I was wrong. Sleep-deprived mistakes. I walked in, tossed my keys on the counter, and froze. The front door was still locked. I moved through the house, turning on lights, checking every room. Nothing. No one. Just me, out of breath and shaking. I was about to convince myself I'd imagined it when I caught a glimpse of something in the hallway mirror. My reflection blinked too slowly. I stepped closer and my reflection didn't move right away. I lifted my hand and it lagged behind. Only by a fraction of a second, but enough for me to notice. I waved, it waved, a beat too late. I don't remember falling asleep that night, but when I woke up, there were muddy footprints leading from the front door to my bed. I live alone. I didn't go to work the next day. Instead, I stayed home, triple-checking all the doors and windows were locked. By midnight, I was sitting on the couch with every light on, scrolling through Reddit and pretending I wasn't terrified. That's when I saw it. My bedroom door, barely cracked open, slowly swung shut. I stood. My throat felt like it was stuffed with cotton. I tiptoed to the door, hand shaking as I pushed it open. The room was empty. I let out a shaky breath and backed away, then bumped into something solid. I turned around. It was me. I was standing in the hallway barefoot, wearing the same oversized shirt I was currently wearing. Same messy bun, same tired eyes. My chest was rising and falling in time with my own breath. But it was smiling. I wasn't. The copy of me reached forward, placing a cold hand on my wrist. Her grip was almost affectionate. That's when I saw the nails, black with dirt, the same dirt that had tracked across my bedroom floor. She didn't speak. She leaned in close, pressing her lips to my ear and whispered, "You are in here now." And then she turned and walked away, disappearing into my bedroom. I ran, didn't grab my phone or my keys. I just sprinted out of the house and didn't stop until I was several blocks away, barefoot and gasping for air. I didn't go home. I couldn't. I went to my friend's apartment and stayed there the next 2 nights, crashing on their couch. I didn't tell them. I didn't sleep. But tonight I came back. I had to. I needed my phone, my wallet, my car. When I walked inside, the house was dark, quiet. I tiptoed through the rooms, grabbing my things, ready to leave, but as I was about to open the door, I heard footsteps coming from the bedroom. And then I saw her. Me. She was standing at the end of the hallway, barefoot and smiling. Only this time her face was rotting, gray skin peeling in places, hollow cheeks, sunken eyes, and she was holding my car keys. When I started to back away, she opened her mouth too wide, jaw cracking, skin splitting at the corners, and dropped the keys into her throat. She swallowed them. I ran. I slammed the front door behind me, but when I reached the street and turned back to look at the house, she was already at the window watching me, smiling with my face. I'm typing this from the gas station a mile away. My feet are bleeding, my throat is raw, and I'm shaking so hard I can barely hold the phone. I'm afraid to go back, but I think it's too late, because when I looked at the station's bathroom mirror just now, my reflection didn't blink at all. In my apartment, I barely paid attention to the bathroom mirror. The place was old and cheap, and I was too broke to be picky. The mirror was like everything else, stained, slightly warped, and permanently fogged in the corners. I only glanced at it in passing, never giving it much thought, until the night I realized my reflection wasn't blinking. It happened while I was brushing my teeth. I had been staring absent-mindedly at my reflection when a strange feeling crept over me. Something was wrong, but I couldn't place what. Then it hit me. I blinked. My reflection didn't. I froze, toothbrush clutched in my hand. My eyes were burning from how long I had been staring, so I forced another blink, slow and deliberate. The man in the mirror held my gaze, his eyes wide and unblinking. I let out a nervous laugh, shaking my head. Maybe I had just imagined it. Maybe I was overtired, or the mirror was old enough to have some weird warping effect. It was an illusion, nothing more. That's what I told myself. Over the next few days, I started to notice other things. Subtle at first, the tiniest delay in my reflection's movements, a hesitation before it matched my expression, a flicker like a buffering video, before it snapped into place, and then one night it smiled at me. I wasn't smiling. The change was so small, so fleeting that I almost convinced myself it hadn't happened, but deep down I know better. Something was wrong with the mirror. I started avoiding it. I'd brush my teeth quickly, keeping my eyes down. I'd shower with the door open, towel draped over the glass to block my view, but no matter how much I ignored it, the feeling of being watched never faded. Last night, everything changed. I woke around 3 a.m., my throat dry, my body aching with exhaustion. Without thinking, I stumbled into the bathroom and flicked on the light. And I looked. I shouldn't have looked, because my reflection was already staring at me. It wasn't mirroring my sleepy confusion. It wasn't matching my sluggish movements. It was grinning. A slow, creeping smile stretched too wide across its face. And then, as I stood there, frozen, it blinked. But not normally. One eye, then the other. A cold wave of nausea rolled through me. My breath hitched. My hands clenched the sink so hard my knuckles went white. My reflection took a step forward. I flipped the light switch off and ran. I don't remember getting back into bed, only the sheer terror that kept me awake until morning. When I finally worked up the courage to check the bathroom, the mirror was empty. Not shattered, not removed, just empty. The sink, the tiled walls, the shower curtain, everything reflected perfectly, but I wasn't there. Then I heard it, a slow, wet footstep behind me, and another, and another. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My body was locked in place, every nerve screaming at me to run, but something in the air, something thick, heavy, wrong, kept me frozen. My breath came in short, shallow bursts, my pulse pounding in my ears. The floor creaked. Whatever was behind me was getting closer. I squeezed my eyes shut. If I didn't look, maybe it wouldn't be real. Maybe I'd wake up in my bed and this would all be some fever dream. A long, slow exhale ghosted against the back of my neck. Not mine. The air around me felt colder, suffocating like the walls were closing in. Then a whisper, so close it could have been inside my own head. "You let me out." The lights flickered. The air smelled damp and rotten, the wood left to decay in a basement. I opened my eyes, and against every instinct I turned around. There was nothing there, but in the mirror my reflection was back, only now it wasn't mimicking me. It stood still, watching as I slowly backed away. Then, just before I turned to run, it raised one hand and waved. Before I understood what was happening, an invisible force, something pulling at me, dragging me towards the mirror. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to fight, to resist. I dug my heels into the floor, twisting, thrashing, forcing my body to break free from the invisible grip. My fingers, which had already begun to press against the glass, curled into a fist, and I punched the mirror. Glass exploded in all directions, shards cutting into my skin, a sound like shrieking metal tearing through the air. The pull stopped. I hit the floor, gasping, hands shaking as I scrambled backward, away from the shattered remains of the mirror. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, from within the broken pieces, something moved. A pale hand reached out from the largest shard, fingers stretching, twisting, grasping at empty air. My face, but wrong, warped with rage, its mouth stretched wide in a silent scream. Then, piece by piece, the shards went dark, like ink spilling over a canvas. The reflection faded into nothing, swallowed by an emptiness that made my stomach turn. And then it was gone. The room was silent. The mirror was shattered, and I was still here. I sat there for hours, waiting, trembling, staring at the pieces, expecting something or anything to come crawling out, but nothing did. I didn't sleep that night. I haven't slept since. I threw away every mirror in my apartment. Any reflective surface I covered. My phone, my laptop screen, even the shine of my doorknob. I avoid them all because I know it's still out there, waiting and watching, and sometimes in the corner of my vision, in a place where my reflection should be, I see nothing at all. I stayed too late at the flea market, and now I know why they close at 3 p.m. I've always loved flea markets. There's something about them, things left behind, forgotten, repurposed. That's why I was thrilled when I moved to Ashbrook and heard about Cooper's Market. It sat just outside town, tucked against a stretch of dense forest. It was open Tuesday to Sunday, from dawn until 3 p.m., without exception. I assumed the closing hours were caused by a city ordinance, or just something people had always done, but the more I asked, the more people avoided answering. Vendors packed up quickly, customers left without lingering, and by 3:05 the place was abandoned, as if it had never been there at all. The market was just down the road from my house. I'd been a few times, usually in the mornings, but I'd never stayed until closing. I wanted to know why they closed so early. Now I do. March 25th, 2:50 p.m. The air changed as closing time approached. Vendors stopped humoring browsers, shifting their attention to breaking down their stalls. No one told stragglers to leave, but the message was clear. I lingered at an antique stall, pretending to examine a set of brass keys. The woman behind the table, thin, weathered, watched me with an unreadable expression. She was wrapping small porcelain dolls in tissue paper, her hands moving fast. "Hey, how's it going?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She barely glanced up from the doll in her hands. "I'm doing great, sweetie." Her voice was kind but distant, polite in a way that felt automatic. She just kept wrapping, her fingers moving fast. I was wondering, why does everyone pack up so early? Is it a city ordinance or something? Her hand stilled for half a second. When she spoke again, her voice was colder. "If you're smart, you won't ask." She folded the last piece of tissue paper over the doll, tucking it in tightly. "We need to leave." She didn't look at me, just kept working. The rustling of paper suddenly sharper, more hurried. March 25th, 3 p.m. I hid inside an old camper van near the back of the lot, crouched behind dusty furniture. Through a small window, I watched the last vendors pull out onto the road in a slow procession, dust rising behind them. March 25th, 3:15 p.m. The lot was empty. For a long time, nothing happened. I sat still, listening to the wind move through the trees, the rustle of old tarps shifting in the breeze. The sun was still high, the air still warm. I pulled out my iPhone, scrolling mindlessly to pass the time, occasionally glancing up to check my surroundings. Everything looked the same, still, normal. I began to wonder if I'd fallen for some elaborate local prank. Time passed, maybe a couple hours, maybe more. My phone had died after being on it for so long. I can't be sure of the time exactly, but it was starting to get dark. The footsteps came first, soft, like someone walking barefoot through dry leaves. Then closer, deliberate, a slow, cautious approach. I held my breath, straining to see outside the camper. Nothing. The lot was still empty, but the feeling was stronger now, like being watched through a window I couldn't find. At some point the whispers began. Not words, not exactly. Just a sound threaded through the air, somewhere between wind and speech. My name surfaced on it over and over, stretched and pulled apart like something spoken through water. I stayed curled behind the furniture, pressing myself against the tightest space I could find. I felt like I was there forever. Then through the corner of a window I saw it, thin, motionless. At first, I thought it was a vendor who had forgotten to leave, but it was too still. The longer I looked, the more unnatural it seemed. Its limbs too long, its posture too rigid, like something standing the way it thought a person should. I didn't move, neither did it. Sometime later, I ducked lower, wedging myself between an old dresser and a rusted mini fridge. The metal was cold against my back. I told myself I could wait it out, that whatever it was, it would go. Then it took a step, slow, deliberate, not searching. It already knew where I was. I clenched my teeth, forcing myself to stay still. Through the thin gap between the camper door, I could see its feet, long, pale, standing just outside. A pause. Then the lightest sound, so faint I almost didn't notice it. A slow, deliberate tapping. Not a knock, just the bare scrape of a fingernail against the metal, testing the surface. It dragged downward, slow and careful, then lifted, only to tap again, softer this time, almost thoughtful, like it was waiting. Minutes passed, maybe more. The tapping stopped. The air sat heavy, thick with silence. Then from nowhere a warmth stirred the back of my neck. Not a breeze, not movement. Just heat, faint, damp. My fingers curled against my leg. The camper door was shut. The window was latched. I stayed still. The warmth came again, closer this time. I felt a shift in the van, fabric dragging against wood, a weight shifting. Then a breath, deep, controlled, right against my skin. Before I could react, something pressed against my spine. Light at first, just the barest touch through my shirt. Then a nail, jagged and slow, tracing its way up my back, higher and higher. I ran. March 25th, 8:40 p.m. I jumped into bed, pulling the blankets around me. Home felt safe. My boyfriend would be off soon. His shift runs from 2 to 10. Just a couple of hours and I wouldn't be alone. I tried to calm my breathing. The bedroom was quiet except for the sound of my cat, Henry, snoring at the foot of my bed. Then a few light taps on the dresser. I was never alone. I grabbed Henry and ran. My keys were still in my pocket. I didn't turn the lights off. I didn't look back. I just got in my car and drove. The dresser was still shut. Now I'm at my brother's house. Henry is curled up behind me, and I can still feel my pulse in my throat. It's late now, and I am so tired after today, so I'm going to hop off. I'll update everyone soon if anything happens. Oh yeah, and I called my boyfriend. I told him not to go home. Told him to come straight here. I don't know if I can go back. Would it even make a difference? I work the late shift at a small convenience store near the train station. It's a quiet job, mostly just stocking shelves and occasionally chatting with customers. But every night, right around closing time, I get a regular who makes my skin crawl. He's an older man, disheveled, with a long trench coat that seems too big for him. He shuffles in just before midnight, mumbling to himself. I know I should call the cops on him, but he never causes any trouble. Just buys a pack of gum and leaves. Last Thursday, as I was ringing him up, he paused and looked at me with wide, sunken eyes. "You hear the train, don't you?" he said, his voice a raspy whisper. Yeah, I guess," I replied, trying to keep it casual. "It's pretty loud." "No," he insisted, leaning closer. "Not the train. The last train. It's calling for you." I chuckled nervously, not wanting to engage too much. "Yeah, well, I have to get going soon." But he just stared at me, and I could feel a cold sweat creeping down my back. "You need to be careful. It's not what it seems." He left without another word, and I tried to shake it off. But his warning echoed in my mind. After closing the store, I walked to the platform to catch the last train home. It was already late, and the streets were eerily quiet. When I got to the platform, the lights flickered. I waited alone, listening to the distant rumble of the train approaching. But as the train pulled in, something felt off. The train was empty, the seats eerily clean. Not a single passenger in sight. I hesitated but figured I'd just ride it home. As I stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening clang. I sat down, looking out the window as the train began to move. The conductor's voice crackled over the intercom. "Next stop, nowhere." Panic surged through me. What did he mean? I pulled out my phone, but there was no service. The train rattled along the tracks, and I tried to convince myself it was just a malfunction. Then I noticed the lights flickering again. It wasn't the train's lights this time. It was something outside the window. Shadows darted past, almost too fast to see. I pressed my face against the glass, heart racing. That's when I saw them. Figures, dark and featureless, standing by the tracks, watching the train go by. They were everywhere, lined up as far as I could see. I felt their gaze pierce through me, freezing my blood. I stood up and banged on the door, desperate to get out, but it was locked tight. "Let me out! Let me out!" I screamed, but the train just kept speeding along. The conductor's voice echoed again. "The last train always takes its passengers." My heart sank. I remembered the man from the store, his words replaying in my mind. I stumbled back to my seat, overwhelmed by dread. As I sat there, the train slowed to a stop and the lights went out completely. In the darkness, I heard whispers surrounding me, a cacophony of voices. "Join us. Stay with us." I felt a cold breath on my neck and I whipped around, but there was nothing there. The door suddenly swung open, revealing a long, dark tunnel ahead. Something in me snapped. I bolted for the door, leaping off the train just before it disappeared into the darkness. I landed on the ground hard, rolling to my feet and sprinting away from the tracks. I didn't stop running until I reached the safety of the convenience store. I locked the door behind me and collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. Now, every night, I wait for the old man to show up again, hoping he'll give me some answers. The last train has become my nightmare, and I can't shake the feeling that it's still out there waiting for me to return. If you're ever near a train station at midnight, heed my warning. Don't take the last train home. I had lived in the same small apartment for 3 years. I knew every creaky floorboard, every annoying draft, and every spot where the paint peeled just a little too much. However, one morning, as I walked down the short hallway toward the kitchen, I stopped. There on the left-hand side of the hall, where there had always been a blank wall, stood a door. It was old, its wood splintering, its handle rusted. The paint was peeling, revealing layers of colors underneath. Gray, red, black. I touched it, half expecting my hand to pass through, as if this were some hallucination, but no. The wood was real, rough under my fingers. I stepped back, my heart pounding in my ears. This door hadn't been there yesterday. I pulled out my phone, snapped a picture, sent it to my landlord, and then called him. "There's a door in my hallway," I said, my voice unsteady. A pause, then laughter. "Of course there is. Every apartment has doors." "No," I yelled, glancing at it again. "This one wasn't here before. It just appeared out of nowhere." My landlord sighed and with an annoyed tone asked, "Have you been drinking?" "I don't drink," and with clenched teeth I told him to just forget it. I hung up and stared at the door. I should just ignore it. That's what any sane person would do, but something about it felt wrong. The air around it was thick, heavy, like stepping into a room where someone had just been smoking. I leaned in closer. A faint scratching sound came from the other side. I jumped and stumbled back. No, absolutely not. I turned, grabbed my car keys, and left the apartment. Nightfall. I spent the whole day out trying to convince myself that when I returned the door would be gone, but when I stepped inside that evening, it was still there. Worse, it was slightly open. Darkness seeped from the crack, thick and unmoving. The air smelled stale, like old books and damp earth. I should leave, move out. call an exorcist, but instead I found myself stepping forward. My fingers brushed the door, and it swung inward with a low groan. Beyond it was not another room, not the other side of my apartment, but a hallway. A long, impossibly dark hallway. Something in that darkness shifted. I felt my breath hitch as I saw movement. Shapes that weren't quite human. Too tall, too thin. Their limbs stretching unnaturally. Then the whispering began. It wasn't a language I knew or had ever heard before, but I understood it all the same. "Come inside." I staggered back and slammed the door shut. My chest heaved. For a long time there was silence. Then from the other side something knocked. Once, twice. Then a slow, deliberate third time. I never opened the door again, but every night, just as I was about to fall asleep, I would hear the knocking, and every night, the door opened just a little wider. My father asked me to play hide and seek for the first time in years. It's gone from playful to terrifying. My dad and I have always been close. We're a small family, just me and him in our modest house on the edge of town. He's a quiet, hard-working man, not the type to play pranks or act childish. In fact, since I became a teenager, he's been pretty serious, focusing on work and making sure I'm doing okay in school. I can't stress enough how out of character his recent behavior has been. About a week ago, out of the blue, Dad asked me with a grin if I wanted to play hide and seek, just like we used to when I was little. At first I laughed, thinking he was joking. We hadn't played that game in years. I'm 18 now, and the last time I remember hiding behind the curtains, I was maybe 7. But he was completely serious. His eyes lit up with a kind of childlike excitement I hadn't seen in a long time. I figured it wouldn't hurt to humor him. Honestly, I was a bit touched. It was nice to see him happy and playful for once. So I agreed. I covered my eyes with my hands and leaned against the living room wall, suppressing a smile as I started counting out loud. I felt a silly wave of nostalgia washing over me with each number. "Ready or not, here I come." I called out, half expecting him to have given up already, but Dad was nowhere in sight at first glance. I wandered through the downstairs rooms, trying not to laugh as I peeked around corners and checked behind furniture. It didn't take long to find him crouching behind the long drapes in the living room. I could see his brown loafers sticking out from beneath the curtain hem. I pulled back the curtain, sing-songing, "Found you," like I was 5 years old again. Dad burst out laughing, a genuine booming laugh that warmed me to hear. He stood up, rubbing the back of his neck with a goofy smile. "Guess I need to try harder, huh?" He chuckled. I laughed with him. It felt good, innocent fun. For a moment, he didn't seem so weighed down by life, and I didn't feel so old. We switched roles, and this time I hid while he counted down from 20. I could hear the playful tone in his voice as he called out numbers, like he was really enjoying this. I stifled giggles from my hiding spot under the kitchen table as his footsteps stomped through the house. Where, oh where could she be? Dad muttered theatrically. I had to clap a hand over my mouth to keep from giving myself away. When he finally found me, honestly I wasn't hidden well, I was too busy holding in laughter. We were both grinning like idiots. That first night we only played a few rounds. After 3 or 4 quick games, we decided to call it quits. It was getting late and we were both a little breathless from laughing and scurrying around. As I headed upstairs to my room, Dad ruffled my hair and thanked me for playing along. I hadn't seen him smile that wide in ages. I remember going to bed feeling happy that night. It was nice to bond with my father like that, to see a spark in him I thought had faded. I had no way of knowing how badly things would spiral after that. At the time, it was just a sweet, silly game. I wish it had stayed that way. A couple of days later, one evening after dinner, Dad asked me eagerly if I wanted another round of hide and seek. I paused, a bit surprised that he was still this enthusiastic, but I agreed. I figured the first time had made him happy, and there was no harm in a little more fun. Still, something in his eyes gave me a pang of unease. His excitement seemed almost intense. This time the game felt different. Dad was taking it much more seriously. As soon as I finished counting and started looking, I could tell he had stepped up his hiding spots significantly. It was almost impressive at first. I found him in the first round curled up under the kitchen sink, knees folded awkwardly to his chest among the pipes and cleaning supplies. He was crammed into the dark cabinet in a way that no grown man should have been able to fit. I actually laughed in disbelief when I opened the cabinet door and saw his contorted body tucked behind the trash bin. He just blinked at me with a weird, childlike grin. After a long moment, he unfolded himself and crawled out. Wordless this time, except for a faint chuckle as he dusted off his pants. In the next round, he somehow balanced himself on top of the wall wardrobe in his bedroom. I walked in thinking he might be hiding in the closet, but then I heard a shuffling above me. I looked up and nearly screamed. Dad was lying flat on his stomach atop the wardrobe, pressed between an old suitcase and the ceiling. I have no idea how he even got up there so quickly and quietly. My heart jumped into my throat as I realized those eyes staring down at me from the darkness were his. When I exclaimed in surprise, he just stared, unblinking. It took me saying, I see you, Dad. Game's over," for him to finally respond. He slowly began to climb down, never breaking eye contact with me the entire time. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Something about the way he moved was off, almost too slow and deliberate. Despite my growing unease, Dad insisted on one more hiding spot. I didn't even have time to object before he took off down the hallway to hide again. I sighed and started counting down from 20, trying to shake off the weird feeling that was creeping up on me. It's just a game, I told myself. He's probably trying to spice it up, make it challenging. And as the seconds ticked by, that nervous knot in my stomach only tightened. I searched for him everywhere. Downstairs, upstairs, even briefly outside on the porch in case he'd stepped out, calling for him as I went. Nothing. He didn't respond at all, not even a peep. 10 minutes passed, then 15, and I still hadn't found him. By now my nerves were on edge. The house was eerily quiet except for the sound of my own footsteps on the floorboards. I gave up and called out, "Okay, you win. Come out now, Dad." My voice echoed down the dark hallway. There was no answer. A panicky thought filled through my mind. What if he got stuck somewhere, or hurt? This had gone way beyond a simple game. I was about to grab my phone to call him when I noticed something odd. The door to the upstairs linen closet was open just a crack. We usually keep that closet shut. I walked towards it, heard thudding. "Dad?" I called softly. No response. With a trembling hand, I yanked the closet door open. At first, all I saw were towels and sheets stuffed on the shelves. Then I saw eyes, my dad's eyes peering out from the darkness between the stacks of linen. I jumped back with a yelp before I recognized him. He was wedged on the top shelf of the closet, curled up and jammed behind a bulky old comforter. He had practically become part of the pile of blankets, completely still. For a moment, we just stared at each other. He didn't blink. He didn't laugh or say, "Got me." He just watched me, half hidden among the sheets, His eyes looked strange, wide and unsteady. It sent a chill through me. Dad, what are you doing? Come out. You're going to hurt yourself. I stammered, trying to sound lighthearted. I was genuinely freaked out to find him in such a bizarre spot. He didn't respond or move. He was crouched so unnaturally on that shelf, I wondered if he could move without help. I reached in and awkwardly touched his arm. It was warm. He was definitely alive and awake. In fact, at my touch, he finally grinned. But it wasn't a normal, embarrassed grin of being caught. It was slow, creeping, and somehow distant, as if it took him a second to remember how to smile. Slowly, he began to untangle himself from the blankets and climb down. I stepped back to give him room, my heart hammering. He practically slithered out of the closet, feet thumping to the floor. I forced a laugh. That was a really good hiding spot, Dad. My voice came out thin. I didn't know what else to say. Dad stood there in the hallway, a full head taller than me, breathing a bit hard. There were deep creases on his arms where the wire shelf had pressed into his skin. He tilted his head, still fixing me with that unsettling stare. Your turn to hide, he said softly. The playful, warm tone from our first game was completely gone. His voice was flat, almost expectant. I blinked. Actually, I wanted to tell him I was done, that this was too weird, but he immediately covered his eyes with one hand and started counting. 20, 19, 18. He whispered, as if we'd never stopped playing. My stomach dropped. He wasn't listening to me at all. Dad, wait, I pleaded, feeling a swirl of fear. He continued counting, peeking between his fingers with one eye. The way he was standing there, looming in the dim hallway, chanting numbers under his breath, it was honestly giving me chills. I did the only thing I could think of. I backed away and ducked into the bathroom, locking the door. My hands were shaking. I don't want to play anymore, I called through the door, voice cracking. His counting stopped at 12. For a long moment there was silence. I held my breath, staring at the thin line of light under the bathroom door, searching for the shadow of his feet. Nothing. After what felt like an eternity, I heard him shuffle away down the hall without a word. I waited another minute, my heart rattling in my chest, before slowly opening the door. The hallway was empty. I found Dad back in the living room, sitting on the couch in the dark. The TV was off. He was just sitting there in silence. He didn't look at me as I inched into the doorway. In the faint light, I could see him rubbing his temples. He looked tired, drained. Dad? I asked quietly. He finally turned his head towards me. His eyes were glassy and looked confused, like he wasn't sure how he'd gotten there. That got a little out of hand, huh? He mumbled, offering me a shaky laugh. The way he spoke was back to his normal self. Gentle, apologetic. I exhaled in relief. Maybe we should call it a night? I said, trying to sound casual. He nodded. Yeah, okay. I hurried upstairs, mumbling something about homework. My mind was racing. What was that? Maybe he was trying to scare me on purpose. But why would he do that? None of it made sense. Lying in bed, I told myself that Dad just got too into the game and lost sight of reality for a bit. Everybody gets carried away once in a while, right? I eventually fell into a fitful sleep, hoping that by morning this would all just be a weird little memory we'd both quietly decide to forget. I hoped that would be the end of our hide-and-seek adventures. It wasn't. The very next night, I was in my room scrolling on my phone when I heard a soft knock on my door. It was almost midnight. Through the wood, I heard my dad's voice, eerily calm. Honey, let's play again. A spike of anxiety shot through me. No, not again. I cracked open my door. Dad stood in the dark hallway, the faint glow from my bedside lamp falling on half his face. He wore the same unnerving smile from the night before. His eyes looked shiny and far away. "Dad, it's really late," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have school tomorrow. Maybe we can skip tonight." He stepped forward into my doorway, not seeming to hear me. "Just one game," he said quietly. It didn't sound like a request. My stomach flipped. There was an intensity in him that set every instinct I had on edge. "Dad," I whispered, "I really don't." Before I could finish, he reached past me and flicked off the lamp in my room. Suddenly we were in near darkness. I gasped in surprise. Dad's face was now just a silhouette inches from mine. "Go ahead," he breathed, that grin still on his face. I stood there frozen. His behavior from last night was seared in my memory. I didn't want to repeat that terror, but I also wasn't sure what he'd do if I refused outright. His smile twitched, and his voice came out sing-song in the dark. "You better hurry. 20, 19, 18. He had already covered his eyes with one hand, starting to count. My heart leapt into my throat. He was starting the game whether I liked it or not. I realized then just how wrong this had all become. This wasn't my dad being goofy or overzealous anymore. Something was broken. Something was dangerous. He kept counting, numbers tumbling from his lips in a chilling whisper. I took a shaky step back into the hall. I could barely see, but I knew I had seconds before he finished. I thought about trying to run past him and get out the front door. But what if it was locked again? And he was blocking the hallway. No time. Hide. For now, just hide. I forced my legs to move. As Dad whispered, 15, 14, 13. I slipped into the guest bedroom across from mine. The door was ajar, and I didn't dare close it and make noise. In the faint glow from a nightlight down the hall, I spotted the bed and immediately dove underneath it. My back pressed up against the dusty hardwood floor as I tried to make myself as flat and small as possible. 10, 9, 8. His voice floated down the hall. In the stillness, I became acutely aware of my own breathing. Far too loud. I clamped a hand over my mouth. My entire body was trembling. This is insane, I thought. I need to get out of here. I need help. 5, 4, 3. I held my breath, tears pricking at my eyes in the darkness under the bed. The house had gone deathly quiet. 2, 1. Ready or not, here I come, Dad announced. His tone was light, sing-song, but I heard the edges of a manic glee in it. Silence fell again. I strained to hear any hint of movement. For a long moment there was nothing. Then, somewhere down the hallway, floorboards creaked. He was walking, slowly. The soft thud of bare feet against wood grew more distinct. He was coming closer. Through the narrow gap between the floor and the bed frame, I saw his feet step into the guest room. I bit my tongue, praying he wouldn't hear the thunderous pounding of my heart. He moved with an eerie calm, no fumbling or hesitation. A shadow shifted as he stooped down. I saw his hand, then his forearm stretched to the ground. My dad dropped to all fours on the floor of the guest room, crouching like a predator ready to pounce. I had to choke back a gasp. His head turned side to side, scanning the room at ground level. All of a sudden, his face swung into view, peering under the bed from the opposite side. I saw his eyes first, catching a glint of hall light. He was grinning, his mouth pulled in that same too-wide smile. I realized he had known exactly where I was. He was just taking his time. I couldn't help it. A tiny, involuntary cry escaped my throat. In an instant, that grin of his stretched wider, and I heard a low giggle rumble from him. Before he could move around to my side, adrenaline took over. I rolled out from under the bed behind him, scrambling on my hands and knees. He must have heard me, because I heard him scuttle around with astonishing speed. His palms slapped the floor as he propelled himself after me. I leapt to my feet and darted out of the guest room door. A wild, high-pitched laugh echoed from behind as he gave chase. "Run, run, run," he crooned in a gleeful whisper that bounced off the dark walls. I sprinted down the hallway, my socks skidding on the wood. I veered into the kitchen and yanked the door closed behind me, then instantly regretted it. Now I was cornered with nowhere to go. I hadn't even caught my breath before I saw the door handle twisting. I threw my weight against the door to hold it shut. For a moment, the handle jiggled insistently. I could hear him breathing on the other side, a soft panting, almost excited sound. "I hear you," he whispered through the door, voice muffled but sing-song. I clapped a hand over my mouth, stifling a sob. Suddenly the pressure on the door released. I realized he'd let go of the handle. Was he leaving? I didn't hear footsteps. Cautiously I eased up on the pressure. Maybe he was trying to trick me, I thought. Seconds dragged by. Then, without warning, a rapid thump, thump, thump hit the door near the bottom. He was pounding on it, low and fast. I yelped and shoved hard against the wood, my panic renewed. The door rattled as he drummed on it from the other side in a frenzy, giggling like a child. He wasn't trying to open it, he was just hitting it, playing with me, testing my resolve. Each hit made the hollow door boom. I bit back a scream, tears streaming now. Just as abruptly as it began, the pounding stopped. The sudden quiet was almost worse. I strained to hear any movement, my ear close to the door. Nothing. Then a single tap came, right at the height of my head, as if he gently pressed a finger there. I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Still hiding?" Dad cooed from the other side of the thin door. He was so close I could almost feel his breath through the gap. "You can't hide forever." His voice was a husky whisper. My blood ran cold. Think. He had me trapped in the kitchen. The only other exit was the back door to the yard. In the dark, I fumbled across the room, groping for the deadbolt. My shaky fingers found it, and I quietly flipped it open. "Please, please," I prayed, "let this door be unlocked." I eased the back door knob, and to my amazement, it turned. I stole one last glance at the kitchen entrance. The door was still shut. I didn't know where Dad was now. He'd gone eerily quiet again. Heart pounding, I pushed open the back door just enough to slip through. The hinges whined ever so softly. I cringed. If he was anywhere nearby, that sound would draw him. The night air was like a shock to my system, cold and real. I realized I was barefoot, but I didn't care. I stepped out onto the back porch and gently pulled the door closed behind me. If I could just get off the porch and around the side of the house, maybe I could make a break for a neighbor's or flag down a car on the street. I crept down the porch steps into our backyard. The grass was icy against my feet. Clouds covered the moon, plunging everything into darkness. Our yard isn't fenced, so theoretically I had a clean shot to run. But if Dad realized I was outside, he could easily catch me in the open. I decided to hug the house wall and move toward the front yard as stealthily as possible. I edged along past the darkened windows of the dining room and living room. Each window was like a black mirror. I was terrified to see my dad's face appear in one of them, looking out at me. But all I saw was my own reflection, and the faint glow of interior lamps we'd left on. I was nearing the front corner of the house. Just a few more feet and I'd be in the front yard, then the street. I risked speeding up my steps, almost there. All of a sudden, a figure stepped out around the corner of the house. My heart stopped. It was Dad. He had gone outside and was circling around, anticipating I might flee. And now we were face to face in the dark yard, only a few yards apart. I stood paralyzed like a deer in headlights. Dad's face was mostly in shadow, but I could see the glint of his eyes. He wasn't smiling anymore. His mouth hung slightly open, and his head was tilted at that unsettling angle again, as if he himself was not sure what he was looking at. We stared at each other for one endless second. Then he lunged. I screamed and bolted to the side, just barely avoiding his grasp. I tore across the front yard. My ankle twisted as I stumbled over something in the dark, sending me sprawling into the cold grass. Pain shot up my leg. I scrambled up, adrenaline numbing the ache. Behind me I heard footsteps, heavy footfalls. He was running at me full tilt. A strange, rasping breath, almost a growl, escaped his throat as he closed in. Desperate, I darted to the left, around the side of our parked car in the driveway. Dad skipped on the dew-slick grass, momentarily losing traction. It gave me a second's lead. I dashed across the driveway, heading for the street. If I could reach the road, maybe someone driving by. My bare feet slapped the pavement as I reached the quiet suburban street. It was empty. No cars, no people, just silent houses. I didn't even have time to scream for help. Dad was only a few paces behind. I could feel him gaining on me. In a last surge of panic, I cut hard into our neighbor's yard, intending to loop back to another driveway or door to pound for help. But I was not fast enough. I felt fingers brush the back of my shirt. Then a hand fisted a clump of my hair. I was yanked backwards violently, losing my balance. I hit the ground on my back. The wind knocked out of me. Before I could even gasp, Dad was on me. He pinned me with his weight, one hand clamping over my mouth. His other hand held my wrists with crushing force above my head. I thrashed, eyes wide with terror. His face loomed inches from mine in the darkness. There was sweat beading on his forehead, and his eyes looked almost hungry. I whimpered against his palm, tears leaking from the corners of my eyes. "Shh," he said softly. His lips were pulled back in a grin, but I saw madness and fury dancing underneath that smile. "You ran," he said, voice tinged with a bizarre mix of disappointment and glee. "That's against the rules." I shook my head frantically, trying to plead, but his hand smothered any sound. My scalp throbbed where he'd yanked my hair. I was completely overpowered. My dad was much stronger than me, and he had leverage. Still pinning me, he lifted his hand from my mouth slightly, just enough for me to suck in a desperate breath. I started to scream, but he slammed his hand down again, cutting it off. "Nope," he whispered, wagging one finger of his other hand in front of my face like I was a naughty child. "No screaming. You know better. This is a quiet game." My chest heaved under him. I was sobbing silently now, the reality hitting me that I might not get away. Above us, a porch light flicked on. One of the neighbors, alerted by the brief scream or the commotion, maybe. Dad glanced toward the light, then back at me. His expression hardened. Without warning, he leaned down and pressed his face into the crook of my neck. I felt his nose and lips against my neck, like he was sniffing me. I squirmed, a jolt of revulsion mixing with terror. He inhaled deeply, then let out a shuddery breath that tickled my neck. I stilled, too frightened to move. "I found you," he murmured against my ear, almost lovingly. "I found you, sweetie." Hot tears slid down my cheeks. My own father's voice was unrecognizable, both tender and twisted at the same time. He giggled softly, a grotesque sound so close to my ear it made me cringe inwardly. A quiet hum came from his throat like a lullaby missing all the notes. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking past me, or maybe inside me. I wanted to retch. This wasn't real. This thing pinning me down couldn't be my dad. My dad was gentle, protective. He wouldn't hurt me, but here he was torturing me with his game. The neighbor's porch light suddenly turned off again. Maybe they looked out, saw nothing in the dark, and figured it was just an animal or a bad dream. Any hope of rescue faded. It was just me and my father in the dark yard, and I was at his mercy. He lifted his head to look at me again. In the faint starlight, I could see sweat dripping down his temple, his hair hanging loose and wild. "You broke the rules," he said, clucking his tongue. "Running, screaming, that's not how we play." I tried to speak under his hand, his voice coming out as a muffled plea, his brow furrowed, almost like he was concerned. He eased his palm off my mouth a bit. "What was that?" Dad, please." I choked out between sobs, my voice quivering. "Please stop." For a split second, something in his face changed. The grin faltered. His eyes flickered with confusion, as if he were waking up from a dream. He blinked rapidly, looking down at me, his daughter crying beneath him, and his breathing grew uneven. "Baby?" he whispered, but it sounded like his normal voice, the real him. What's... He released my wrists and leaned back slightly, shifting off me. Relief and hope surged in my chest. "Dad?" I whispered back. "Are you okay? Please stop. Let's go inside." I ran a trembling hand through his hair. In the dark, I saw a flash of remorse in his expression. He opened his mouth to say something, maybe to apologize. I'll never know, because in the next instant, that manic gleam flooded back into his eyes, as if a switch flipped. His mouth curved slowly back into that terrible smile. "Oh," he cooed, pressing a finger to my lips to hush me. "You almost fooled me. Nearly got me to break character." He chuckled, and my heart sank. Whatever momentary clarity he'd had, it was gone. The game had him, again. He stood up in one swift motion, yanking me to my feet by my arm. I stumbled, legs weak and aching. Before I could try to pull away, he started half dragging, half guiding me back toward our house. His grip was steel. I couldn't wrench free. "It's okay," he whispered as if comforting me. "Game's almost over. Just one last round. One special round." I dug my heels in, a surge of fight left in me. "No, Dad, let me go," I cried, trying to peel his fingers off my arm. He responded by effortlessly scooping me up over his shoulder. I kicked and pounded on his back, but he carried me as if I weighed nothing. Back inside the house we went. Through the back door I'd escaped from, he kicked it shut behind him. The lock clicked once more. My hope of escape extinguished like a candle flame. He set me down on my feet in the living room, but kept a tight hold on my wrist. I was sobbing openly now, my entire body shaking with adrenaline and exhaustion. He shushed me gently, wiping a tear from my cheek with his free hand. "Don't cry," he murmured. "It's all okay. It's just a game, remember? Just playing our game." His voice had that sing-song lilt again. I looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of the dad I knew. "Please, Please, let's stop now, I begged softly. We can just sit and talk. I won't tell anyone. I promise. Let's just stop. He cocked his head, smiling kindly. For one heart-stopping second, I thought I'd gotten through, but then he brought a finger to his lips. Shh, no more talking, only hiding. Fresh tears spilled as he began pulling me toward the hallway. I dug my heels in again, sobbing. I don't want to hide, Dad. I don't want to play anymore. Without warning, he whirled on me, eyes flashing with blind anger. You will hide, he snarled, the sudden rage in his voice like a thunderclap. I cowered, stunned. He had never shouted at me like that in my life. He immediately composed himself, smile returning as if nothing happened. But his grip on my wrist tightened until I winced. In a gentle tone he continued, You will hide, and I will seek. One last round, and no more running away, okay? If you do, I'll be very cross. He wagged his finger again, lightly tapping the tip of my nose with it. I flinched. He then covered his eyes theatrically with both hands and started to count once more. 10, 9, 8. His voice echoed down the dark hall, numbly hiccuping back sobs. I realized I had no choice. If I ran or fought, he'd overpower me again easily, and who knows what he'd do. My only hope was to hide, let him find me, and pray this final round would satisfy whatever bizarre compulsion had overtaken him. Maybe then he'd stop. Maybe then I could reason with him, or escape if he let his guard down. So I ran, not out the door, but deeper into the house, to hide. He counted cheerfully behind me. I dashed into my bedroom and slid under the bed. It was childish, obvious, but my options were limited, and I was running on pure fear. I used to hide here when I broke something, my childhood safe space. I scooted as far against the wall as I could, among some forgotten shoes and dust. Then I forced myself to breathe slowly, quietly. My body ached and my mind was screaming at me that this was a terrible idea, but I didn't know what else to do. 3, 2, 1. Ready or not? I heard him call out. His voice had a sing-songy glee again. The final hunt had begun. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to calm the shaking of my limbs. This has to end, I thought. It has to. Footsteps padded down the hall like a hungry wolf. Unlike earlier, he wasn't being stealthy now. He wanted me to hear him coming, to stew in fear. The deliberate steps stopped outside my door. I heard the door slowly squeak open. Silence. Then in the darkness, tap, tap, tap. He was knocking lightly on my door, in a mocking, otherworldly rhythm. Honey? He called softly. Are you in here? I bit down on my hand to keep from making any noise. Through the bed frame slats, I could see just a sliver of the room, lit faintly by the street lamp glow through my window. A dark shape crossed the beam of light. He was inside. I held my breath, not daring to peek properly. The heavy footfalls moved to my closet. I heard the closet door creak open. Hangers clattered as he pushed aside clothes. Not here, he whispered, and I could hear the smile in his voice. A drawer slid open. He was checking my dresser. Absurdly. He was toying with me, searching everywhere except the most obvious place first, drawing it out. I clenched my jaw, body rigid. The footsteps came closer to the bed. My heart was a jackhammer. I saw his feet appear inches from where I lay. He crouched down. The bed springs above me groaned slightly under his weight as he leaned on the mattress. I could make out his face now, upside down as he peered under, smiling. Our eyes met. I will never forget that look in his eyes. Triumphant, wild, hungry, like a man possessed. "There you are," he sing-songed. A strangled scream ripped out of me. In a flash, his hands shot under the bed and latched onto my ankles. I was yanked out with astonishing force, nails scraping the floor as I tried to hold on to anything. He dragged me out from under the bed as easily as if I were a doll. I thrashed, kicking at him, but he didn't let go. One of my kicks caught him in the chin, and his head snapped back. For a brief moment, I thought I might have hurt him, but he only laughed, a short, giddy sound, and tightened his grip painfully. "No more cheating," he hissed, pulling me fully into his grasp. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, pinning my arms to my sides. I screamed and bucked, but it was like struggling against iron. He hauled me backward out of my bedroom. I was off the ground, feet flailing uselessly. He was carrying me down the hall, toward the living room again. I could see the front door directly ahead, still locked and bolted, my vision blurred with tears and dizziness. "Shh," Dad murmured in my ear as I writhed. "It's over. Game over." There was a strange relief in his voice. We reached the living room. He let go of me. I collapsed onto the carpet, scrambling away from him on all fours. He didn't chase this time. He just stood there, breathing hard, watching me with that detached curiosity. I backed myself into the far corner of the living room, near the fireplace. There was nowhere left to run. I was trapped. My whole body quaked, and my breath came in ragged sobs. Dad loomed a few feet away, turning his back to the doorway, just watching. "It's over," he repeated softly to the empty door frame. He turned and took a single step toward me. In his hand, I now noticed he held something shiny, the fireplace poker. I hadn't seen him grab it, but he must have as we entered the room. He dragged it lightly on the floor beside him, almost casually. I pressed myself tighter into the corner, my hands up defensively. "Dad, please," I croaked, exhausted and terrified. He lifted the poker, twirling it in a showy way. "You know," he said conversationally, "when you were little, you used to hide in this spot all the time." He pointed the iron poker right at the corner where I huddled. My little girl, curled up like a kitten by the fireplace. So predictable, he tisked, shaking his head with a smile. "And here you are again. I used to pretend you disappeared when you hid here. That maybe the house took you." I had nowhere to go. He stood between me and any exit. I was too weak to fight anymore. My eyes darted around for something, anything I could use as a weapon, but he was already raising the poker high. I closed my eyes, a whimper escaping. There was a sudden loud bang on the front door. Both of us startled. Dad's head snapped toward the door, poker still raised. Another bang, then a voice. "Police, is everything okay in there?" Through my haze of fear, I realized the neighbor had called the cops after all. That single scream and porch light must have spurred them to call. I mustered every bit of strength and screamed, "Help! I'm in here! Help me!" Dad's face contorted with rage. He lunged toward me, but then, crash! The front door burst open, splintering as two officers rammed through it. Light from their flashlights sliced into the living room. "Drop it! Drop the weapon!" One officer shouted, gun drawn. Dad turned to them slowly, calculated, the poker still in his hand. For a terrifying second I thought he might charge them. He took one unsteady step forward, raising the iron bar. The officers yelled again, "Drop it now!" He halted, looking from them to the poker, as if confused how it got in his hand. Then the metal clang echoed as he let it fall to the floor. They rushed him. Dad didn't resist. He just sank to his knees, laughing softly as they forced his arms behind his back. "Just playing a game," he murmured to no one in particular, as they pinned him down and cuffed him. "They wanted to just play a little game." One officer moved to me, wrapping a blanket, from where I don't even know, around my shaking form and guiding me out of the corner. I collapsed into sobs, trying to explain in broken gasps what happened, but she gently shushed me. "It's okay now. You're safe," she said. Those words unleashed a flood of relief tears that I thought might never stop. As they led my father away, he turned his face to look at me one last time. His eyes were clear. His face was streaked with tears. In a small, broken voice, he said, "I'm sorry, baby. It wouldn't stop counting down. And then he was gone, guided out into the flashing red and blue lights beyond the busted door. That was 3 days ago. I'm staying with an aunt now, and I haven't slept since. My dad is in a psychiatric hospital for evaluation. They think he had some kind of psychotic break. They found no drugs in his system, no obvious cause. When I visited, accompanied by 2 orderlies and my aunt, he looked at me with hollow eyes and said he doesn't remember much of that night, just bits and pieces of a bad dream, where he was chasing a shadow that had stolen his little girl. The doctors think he was acting out some kind of delusion. I don't know. Part of me wonders if something else was in the house with us, something that used my dad to get to me. I know that sounds crazy, but I watched my dad change into something else over those days, and I can't explain it. They tell me he's responding well to medication, that he might be able to come home in a few weeks once he's stable. I want to believe that. I want my dad back. But I'm also terrified. Every time I close my eyes, I see his face inches from mine in the dark, hear that gleeful whisper, "Found you." What if he's never truly back? What if that part of him comes out again? I don't think I could ever play hide and seek again. Not with him. Not with anyone. I'll never feel safe hiding. I found the first letter on a Tuesday. It didn't come in the mail. Not really. It was just there, in our mailbox. No stamp, no postmark, no return address. Just our names written in a child's handwriting. Mara and Eli. Inside, on a single sheet of folded notebook paper, was this. "Hi, Mom and Dad. You don't know me yet, but I'm your son. I'm writing from the future. I just wanted to say thank you. You're doing everything right. I'll see you soon. Love, me." We laughed at first. We thought it was a prank. Maybe one of the neighborhood kids had slipped it in. It was cute, innocent. We saved it on the fridge for fun. The second letter arrived a week later. This time it was inside the house. I found it on the kitchen counter, beside the coffee pot. No one had been in. No signs of a break-in. Nothing stolen. The doors were locked. We had no cameras, but we were always careful. Still, there it was. "Hi again. Mara, your headaches are from the water. It's the pipes. Don't drink it anymore. Eli, bring an umbrella on Thursday. You'll need it. I love you. Me." Mara had been having migraines for weeks. Her doctor thought it was stress, maybe hormones. But she stopped drinking the tap water and switched to bottled. Within 3 days, the headaches vanished. Thursday brought on unexpected hailstorm. Everyone at the office was drenched. I was dry. After that, we stopped laughing. We didn't talk about it at first, we just obeyed, quietly, unsure why. The letters were always right. Helpful, loving. They felt real. They started arriving regularly. The third letter told us not to attend a birthday party we'd RSVP'd 2 weeks ago. It was vague. Please don't go to the party on Saturday. Something bad will happen, but you'll be safe if you stay home. I promise. We stayed home. The next day, the news reported a carbon monoxide leak at the event hall. Several people were hospitalized. One person died. The following letter said, "Thank you. That would have been very bad for us." We started saving every letter. They felt sacred. They always came when we were alone, always in strange places, under pillows, inside cupboards, once even inside the fridge, folded neatly between 2 cartons of eggs. Each note felt warmer, more intimate, more personal. They began using our childhood stories, ones we'd only ever shared in whispers. "Mom, remember the pink shoes you buried in the woods behind Grandma's house? I found them. They were still there. Thank you." Mara burst into tears. She hadn't thought of those shoes in 20 years. "Dad, the letter you wrote to your grandpa before he died, he read it. He says thank you." My knees buckled. I had burned that letter before ever sending it. Then the warnings began. They were subtle at first. "Don't answer Aunt Lydia's calls anymore. She doesn't believe in me. She's going to make you forget." We ignored that one. Lydia came to visit the next week. She walked through our house, sat on our couch, and said she felt something wrong in the air. She kept asking if we were okay, if we were sleeping, if we were eating. She left us a dream catcher and told Mara to wear lavender on her wrists. The letter that night said, "She saw too much. You have to be careful." 2 days later, Lydia's car crashed on a mountain road. She survived, but she was in a coma for 2 weeks. We never called her again. By the time the pregnancy test came back positive, we didn't question it. It didn't matter that we hadn't planned for children. It didn't matter that I'd had a vasectomy 5 years earlier. "Miracle," Mara whispered. "Destiny," I said. We held hands in the kitchen, trembling. The house felt too still. Outside, the wind stopped. The letter was already on the counter. "He's coming. Thank you for making it possible." The letters became more frequent, more urgent. "Don't trust the man with the dog who walks past at 8:15. He's watching us. Don't let the doctor touch Mom's stomach. He'll feel something he's not supposed to. Don't look into the mirror for too long." We didn't know what that meant, but after a while we couldn't. Our reflections began to move out of sync. The pregnancy progressed rapidly. By what should have been week 12, Mara looked full term. She didn't gain weight. Her skin remained smooth, flawless. But her stomach grew and the skin over it pulsed faintly, like something underneath was testing the boundaries. She didn't sleep much. When she did, she murmured in a language I didn't recognize. The letter still addressed us lovingly. "You're both doing so well. I'm so proud of you. Don't listen to anyone else. They'll try to keep us apart. You have to protect me. We're almost ready." Then came the letter about Mr. Halberd, our neighbor. "He knows. He's been watching you. He's going to ruin everything. You have to stop him." We were scared. We believed it. Halberd had always been nosy, sure, but lately he had been stopping by more, asking strange questions. "You folks expecting? You look different. This house, something about it feels wrong now." The next note said, "He's lying. He always has. He hurt children once. He'd hurt me too. Do what you need to do." Mara convinced me to confront him. It wasn't supposed to happen like it did. But it did. Hellbird fell down the stairs. His neck broke. We didn't call the police. We buried him under the garden shed. We found a letter in the soil the next morning. Thank you. He won't interfere anymore. Mara went into labor that night. That's when the sky turned black. Not cloudy, not stormy, just black. Like someone had painted over the sky with tar and forgot to leave room for the stars. The power flickered once, then died. Every light, every outlet. My phone screen refused to turn on, even with a full charge. The clocks froze at 11:44. Outside the window there were no streetlights, no moonlight. Just a black wall where the world used to be. Even sound felt muffled, like we were wrapped in cotton. Mara screamed. It wasn't a cry of pain, it was something else. Her voice didn't echo. It seemed to collapse in on itself. The sound falling flat in the air like it wasn't allowed to leave the room. And then it stopped. Her eyes rolled back, her mouth hung open, and from her lips came a voice that wasn't hers. Not deep, not monstrous. Just wrong. Like 100 whispers trying to form one word. I leaned close, trying to understand. She convulsed once, twice, then went completely still. Her stomach bulged and contracted in slow, rhythmic pulses. Something was moving beneath the skin, not kicking, shifting, like it was stretching, unfolding. I backed away. The room felt hotter by the second. The walls pulsed with a dull red hue, as if lit from behind veins. The floor vibrated beneath my feet in perfect sync with Mara's breaths. Deep, dragging, unnatural. There was no blood, no contractions, just silence and movement. Then came the sound, a high-pitched whine, like metal scraping against bone. It came from Mara's mouth, eyes, fingertips. Her skin began to glow, and just as quickly, it stopped. Her belly went still, her eyes fluttered open. She looked at me, really looked at me, and smiled. "It's okay now," she said. I dropped to my knees beside her. The glow in her skin faded, and then slowly, impossibly, she reached down and pulled something out of herself. Not screaming, not shaking. Calm, serene. What she held was not a baby. It was shaped like one, sure, but the proportions were wrong. Limbs too long, eyes too large, skin smooth and translucent like polished stone. It blinked at me, its mouth opened into a crooked smile, and God help me, I smiled back. We didn't sleep that night, not because we were afraid, because the baby, our son, didn't want us to. He didn't cry, he didn't fuss. He just stared, wide-eyed, from the little nest of blankets we laid him in, on the living room floor. His eyes never closed. Not once. "He doesn't blink," Mara said around 3 a.m. I hadn't noticed, but she was right. He watched us constantly, like he was memorizing us, studying us like we were a test, and he was waiting for the results. And we felt proud, grateful. There were no more letters. None the next morning, none the next week. But there were changes. Mara no longer needed food. Not really. She'd pick at toast, sip at tea, but nothing else. She stopped sleeping entirely, yet never seemed tired. She said her dreams now lived outside of her, that he had taken them from her for safekeeping. I kept working, going through the motions, but people looked at me differently. My coworkers asked if I was okay. One even reached out and grabbed my arm like he thought I was about to collapse. "You've been losing weight," he said. "You look pale." I looked in the mirror that night and I didn't recognize myself, but when I turned away, I saw my reflection blink, and I hadn't. The next letter came 2 weeks later. It wasn't in the mailbox, it was in the crib, folded beneath our son's body. like a note left in a bassinet at a fire station. It was different. Printed, not handwritten. Sharp letters, uniform and cold. Phase 1 complete. Secondary conditioning successful. Intervention no longer necessary. Initiate localization. We didn't understand what it meant until the dream started. Not for us, for others. We got a call from a friend in New York, terrified. She said she dreamed of us, but not how we are. She saw us in a house with no windows, holding something that looked like a child but wasn't, smiling, rocking it, singing lullabies in a language she couldn't understand. She woke up crying. Then the dreams spread. Relatives, co-workers, strangers. People messaged us, confused, disturbed. We saw you. We saw him. He told us things. He told us what's coming. He, not it. He had a name now, and then he spoke it. To us, out loud, just one word in a language we couldn't place. But it cracked the glass on the coffee table, sent every dog on the block into a howling frenzy. Mara dropped to her knees and whispered, "Yes, yes, I hear you." The house felt smaller after that, warmer. The walls pulsed slightly, like lungs. The lights no longer worked, but we didn't need them. Everything inside glowed softly, like it had its own hidden sun. I stopped going to work. I couldn't remember what my job had been anyway. Mara spent all day with him, cradling him, speaking to him in strange murmurs. Her head tilted like she was listening to music I couldn't hear. Sometimes he'd hum, not a lullaby, but something more primal, like static turned into a melody. I started finding drawings on the walls, childlike scribbles at first, then more complex. Circles within circles, jagged geometry, sharp lines forming impossible angles. I tried to wipe them off. They wouldn't smudge. They were drawn in something that wasn't ink. I woke one morning to find a spiral traced on my chest in fine red lines. Not a wound. More like a tattoo that had always been there. That's when I knew he'd start using me too. The next letter didn't come on paper. It came through the radio. The kitchen radio hadn't worked since the blackout, but it turned on by itself at 2:17 a.m. White noise at first, then a child's voice. "You've both done beautifully. It's almost time. Please make room. Others are coming." The sound looped once, then the radio exploded. It started raining the next day. Black rain, thick and slow, like oil. It didn't splash, it stuck. The sky above us had not returned. There was no sun, no clouds, just that awful velvet void, like we lived beneath a blanket that didn't want to be removed. I tried to call my brother. The line clicked and opened into silence. Then I heard him breathing, then crying, then a voice, our son's voice saying, "He's not ready." Mara was ready. She started setting up the house, rearranging the furniture. She said they needed a nursery. Not for him, for them. "They're coming soon enough," she told me one night while folding linens. "He's made it safe for them now." "Who?" I asked, because I didn't want to believe I already knew. She looked at me with those wide, glowing eyes and said, "The others." 2 nights later, we watched from the porch as the man across the street walked into his front yard, dropped to his knees and carved a circle into his chest using the edge of a broken CD. He was smiling the entire time. When I ran to him, he was already gone, but on his shirt, written in something that might have been blood, or something worse, was one word: ready. We stopped getting mail. No trucks came down the street anymore. No deliveries, no neighbors. The homes around us went dark one by one. Some remained standing, shadows behind their windows. Others collapsed in on themselves overnight, like paper folding into ash. Still, we stayed because he told us to. The house had changed. The doors no longer opened outward. Behind every door was another room of the house. The living room, the kitchen, the nursery. They had multiplied. Endless variations of the same 3 places, looping deeper and deeper the more you opened. I once passed through 7 living rooms before finding Mara again. She said it was better this way. We need room for everyone. The next letter was scratched into the inside of the refrigerator. He's almost ready to be born again. We didn't understand. He's already here, I whispered. No, Mara said gently. That was just the beginning. That night, he changed. He grew, not larger, but deeper. He felt heavier in our arms, like he contained more space than the outside of his body suggested. His eyes no longer blinked. They shifted, like you were never quite looking at them directly, no matter where you stood. He called me by my real name, not Eli, the one no one knows, not even Mara. And when I asked him how he knew it, he said, I gave it to you. We found the final letter in our bed, folded neatly, resting on our pillows. This one wasn't signed. The bridge is built. The hosts are prepared. The signal will arrive soon. Do not interfere. The walls began to hum. The black sky tore open, but it didn't reveal stars. It revealed an eye, huge, pulsing, watching, and it blinked. We didn't scream when the sky blinked. We knelt. Everyone did. Across the street, from what houses remained, figures emerged, staggering, praying, chanting in tongues that didn't belong to any language we knew. Some we recognized, some we didn't. All of them watched the sky and waited, and our sun, our beautiful, impossible sun, smiled. Now you see, he said. He wasn't a child anymore, not in the way we understood. His body hadn't aged, but his presence filled the house like gravity. He bent the air, lights avoided him, shadows bowed. We didn't mean to help this, I told Mara. She didn't answer. She was no longer Mara. Not really. It started 3 nights ago. I found her standing in the hallway tracing the spiral on her chest. She said it itched, said it moved when she looked away. She whispered that she'd started dreaming of herself, from the outside, watching her own body carry out instructions she hadn't consciously heard. She didn't fight it. I think a part of her had been gone for weeks. And now, there was no more denying it. The air crackled with electricity. The ground shook in pulses. The eye in the sky blinked once more. Then the letter appeared, not in the house, in my mind. A voice, warm, familiar. You were never meant to survive me, only to usher me in. The locks have been undone, the veil rewritten, the shape of the world bent back to its origin, to me. I did not come to destroy your world. I came to replace it. You were the prayer, and now you are the silence that follows it. There will be no aftermath, no reckoning, only continuity. In my shape, in my image, and in the names that come after yours are forgotten. Sleep now. The new world does not require your witness. I tried to scream, but my mouth no longer worked. I tried to run, but my legs were no longer mine. Mara turned to me one last time. She opened her mouth, and in our son's voice, she said, "We're already inside." The last time I decided to journal my travels didn't end well. I was hunting a demon that had the supernatural abilities to create life out of written word. And all the messed up stuff I put down came back to kick my butt for months after that. Nearly killed me on multiple occasions. And I had many sleepless nights. I think it's safe to say that the pesky little guy got what was coming to him, though. I thought it ironic to use my own word as bait, only to lure him into a paradox. It went something like, "You will cease to exist once you understand why you cannot." You like that? I spent all day thinking about the best way to mess with him. Poor guy tried to twist out of it, but you can't fight words when they break your own rules. He ended up comatose, loaded up in the back of my truck, and thrown into the holy burn pit after that. Good riddance. Anyway, my shrink says I gotta keep writing things down and really process my thoughts and actions. I can then maybe identify what triggers my PTSD and try to make some progress out of it. I don't think he really understands the gravity of what I do. As long as I keep hunting, I am safe. The world is a safer place. It falls on me to keep it that way. So, I'm shacked up in this musty yellow motel room in the middle of nowhere typing out my emotions. As long as it helps me hunt, then it's alright by me. Middle of nowhere is actually a special place called the Hoh Rainforest in Olympic National Park. All kinds of god and devil-given creatures alike call it home. It's over 1,400 square miles of dense and mountainous terrain. Most of it is so remote that GPS and cell service doesn't work at all. What I'm saying is, I'm very lucky to have narrowed my search down to just a small part of it. About 25 square miles is where my stage is being set here in Hoh. Hopefully it ends up being a good show. It's also one of the only temperate rainforests in the world, meaning it's cold, foggy, and constantly damp. Everything out here is covered in thick sheets of emerald moss. They grow out of twisted and wound-up trees under the cozy blanket of fog. Those wind-up trees are massive and ancient. Some even tower well beyond 300 feet. Their twisted roots and dense undergrowth make the forest a labyrinth with no real entrance or exit. Perfect for a little mouse like me to go and find my cheese. The whole place looks and feels like a dream, straight out of high fantasy. I've already done some preliminary scoping out of the forest to figure out what I'll need to survive for a week or so. Camping out there is serene, but also utterly terrifying. It's so silent. You could hear your own blood pumping, only to be broken up by the sounds of blood-curdling screams. Cougars. Among the animals to look out for in these parts are of course bears, the aforementioned cougars, and maybe an elk if it's got its balls twisted in a knot that day. But the real big bad, the one I'm interested in, is responsible for centuries worth of disappearances and lunatics. I call it the Mnemosyth, from Mnemosyne, the Greek goddess of memory, and Sith, an old word for shadow, or parasite. It's an elusive creature that I suspect has some sort of memory warping ability. From what I understand of the research, it feeds off of the memories of its victims, sucking them of their life's essence, so to speak. Once your memory is gone, you become like a husk with a brain filled with holes, as if a parasite burrowed its way through your soft, fatty tissue, and left you to rot. I talked to a young man last week who had an encounter with it, the only possible survivor from such a deadly monster. Every other account was just second-hand descriptions of events. I can assure you that he acted like his head was Swiss cheese, and he looked like it too. After the incident, he sure as crap couldn't take care of himself anymore. His parents kept him in his own room in the backyard. It was a shed converted to a livable area, complete with a bathroom, AC, and everything. They claimed that they couldn't handle his episodes anymore, and so I got the vibe that they needed the space more than he did. They looked tired. They wheeled out a decrepit young man with 1,000-yard stare, folded in a strange position, one leg tucked under himself and left arm grabbing the back of his seat. He looked like the origami of pain, a collection of mobile, bagged fluids and tubes littered around him, some coming in, others out. He was gaunt and deathly. Head was caved in, a perfect concave lens around both temples, leading to a sharp edge at the top where some wiry hair held on. I smiled and waved with smooth southern hospitality, but could tell my smile was just a bit too straight-lipped. That slight grimace of acknowledging something terrible had happened to him, and my sympathy couldn't help but show itself in an awkward gesture. I hoped his parents didn't notice and thought I was wincing, but they didn't seem to mind. They gave me nothing but kindness, the sort of people that would take great care of their disabled child. Good people. "Hey, Eddie, my name's Mark," I said. I reached over and touched his frail shoulder. He squeezed his eyes and lurched back in his chair a little, like I was threatening to hit him. "He hasn't talked much since the accident," said his mom. The father chimed in. "He doesn't do much at all, stares off into space, draws a little. He likes that one cartoon. You know, the creepy one with that weird pink dog. Courage, baby." Yeah, that one." He looked solemnly at Eddie, then glanced at his wife for a brief moment, seemingly from embarrassment. I crouched down and got a better look at the kid. From what I've heard, the parents, Beth and Rick, went camping in Olympic National with their 2 sons, Eddie and Ryan, about a year ago. "So, Eddie, you like to draw?" He looked scared, nodded his head a little. "Beth, could you show me some of his drawings?" She took me inside his shed, which honestly looked better than my own apartment. It was pristine and clean, very sterile, hospital-like. His drawings were black and white sketches of abstract nature. Some almost looked like chicken scratch. They were all pinned up on a corkboard past a drafting table set up to fit his wheelchair under it. Some of the chicken scratch looked like humanoid figures, almost amphibious and wet, dripping with charcoal onto eggshell ground. Some of them looked like a little boy, holding hands with a taller, more pronounced and thick stick figure. I heard the rattle of Eddie's wheelchair behind me, and when I turned around, he looked me in the eyes for the first time. "Don't trust what you know," he slurred. "What you think." He took a deep and labored breath. "Yourself." I don't know what Eddie was trying to tell me, but I think at that moment, he knew what I was at his home for. He knew what I was after, and I felt like he was trying to warn me. They said that Eddie started to act irrationally on the first day camping. He would say the same things over and over. He would think he was somewhere he was not. He started to have some night terrors in the tent, then went out sleepwalking in the middle of the night. Beth got scared when she woke up and didn't see poor Eddie in his sleeping bag. She ran out into the forest, following the sounds of light thudding in the distance, and found Eddie bashing his head into a tree, over and over. The bark was stripped bare, and so was his head, raw and broken, bleeding all over his face. He turned and looked at his mother, woke up, and cried. He didn't know where he was or what was happening to him. That night was the single most excruciating time of their lives, something feverish that punched my gut and made me queasy. Beth tried to wake up her family, but she said it was as if they were drugged. They'd just mumble. Rick would say some profanities and something about leaving him alone, and they'd doze off once more. Meanwhile, Eddie was a zombie, looking off into those damp, twisted trees, eyes following each one in spirals, making him nauseous. He retched onto the ground, creating puddles of stomach acid until he dry heaved while his mom was desperately shaking and slapping her husband to wake up. "I don't want to go. No, Mom, please. Please don't leave me. Please," he begged her as she squeezed her eldest's red, stained face and promised him everything was going to be okay. Beth dragged Rick out of the tent to try and put him in the truck to take to the hospital. She had the right idea to get out of Dodge, but it was too late. She says she swore she saw something dragging Ryan's limp body in the dark. When she shined a light, the thing hissed at her and looked at Eddie, who started to attack his mom. He didn't recognize her anymore and screamed she was a monster as he brutally beat his mom half to death. She said she could hear the bones in her face crunching under the weight of his fists. Her screams and pleas for help were so loud it finally woke up Rick, who promptly restrained his son. What are you doing?" she heard as she ran after the thing carrying Ryan into the woods. All bloodied, face smashed in, and still in her pajamas, she looked through swollen eyes as the thing held hands with Ryan, who was still only 5, kissed him on the cheek, and let him jump off the cliff ahead of her. Eddie bellowed behind, passing her right by as she was still frozen in shock, looking at a real-life monster that just pushed her little baby off the edge. He jumped off in one big leap to what was supposed to be his demise. She thought she lost both her babies that night. She thought she was insane. That's what the police told her, too. That's what they told Rick, who at the time was folded like laundry at the foot of the truck by the hands of his deranged and empowered son. The thing looked back at her and she swore she saw it give her a smirk, reveling in her pain just for a moment before it leaped away. The authorities found Eddie and Ryan's bodies the next day. No one thought Eddie had even a remote chance of survival, but he did. He hung on that whole night and half a day, battered and broken at the bottom of a crumbling rock face, with his little brother's dead body lying next to him. Nothing he could do, nothing he could say to be forgiven, just the pain, just the sadness, just the insanity to keep him company. After hearing all of this, I didn't know what made the young man mad. Was it the Nemosith or his own actions? But Beth showed me a copy of his head MRI when I asked for it, and I saw for myself what the real damage was. It looked like a worm burrowed its way through his head, leaving it a messy art piece of collapsed bridges and glued together with sticks. How could anyone be alive with nothing but mush in their head? How could anyone keep living after they did such a thing, thinking it was all their fault and had no one else to blame? I couldn't help but blurt out through gritted teeth, "This is sick." Beth looked up at me, finally with tears in her eyes and conviction in her voice, stronger than any other sentence I heard the woman ever say to me. "You're going to kill it. You're going to stop that thing." Deep down, boiling inside me, was a rage I haven't felt in a long time. Something animalistic and profoundly human. Consider it dead. So that's how I got here, out in the boonies of Washington, setting the stage of my next hunt. I plan on waking up at dawn and heading to a fire lookout perched on a tall mountain overlooking the rainforest. I got my weapons ready, but something tells me I'll need some better tricks up my sleeve for a creature that'll wipe my memory and mess with my head. Something more than just firepower. I'll definitely need to keep my wits about me. The view from up here is amazing. Panoramic windows and deck give me the greatest vantage I can ask for. Although this being the case, dense fog and thick forest obscure the ground level where I can assume the Nemosith is hiding out. I already set a couple of alarm traps in my vicinity and made sure my presence known with a large bonfire I built at the base of the tower. The little guy should know I'm here, and I hope to God he's hungry. I changed up my sleep schedule earlier on in the week so I can stay energized through the night, as it is likely a nocturnal animal. Just woke up a little before sunset, and I'm enjoying some instant coffee on the deck, taking deep breaths and establishing a strong connection with my mind and body. If this thing is going to mess with my head, I figured the least I could do is practice some meditation, something my shrink also wants me to do anyways. I don't believe in the nonsense like the spirituality you can buy at a supermarket, but I concur that the meditations do in fact calm my nerves. My list is all checked off. Traps, food, water, shelter, transport, radio. Looks good. Okay, it's time to find out what us little people are made of. Apologies if some of this doesn't make much sense. I'm still putting together the pieces of what happened last night. The sun was setting in marvelous glows of pastel tones arranged in warm colors that filled my body with comfort. I set down my mug when the final embers of the day vanished to reveal a night sky filled with the Milky Way, like someone turned on the universe's nightlight. It presented everything in just enough cool-toned lighting that a flashlight wasn't needed until the fog rolled in. I put on my backpack and threw the machete into my sling when I heard it. A loud bang, like a gunshot ringing out that rustled many feathers as a flock of birds got scared away just east of me. It could have been anything, but I had to go check and make sure. Climbing down the steps of the old rickety tower, I began to hear brutal screaming, the kind of screams you only hear in dire circumstances, like someone was being mauled, then another and another. I was surrounded by the screams of what sounded like women all around me. I knew them to be cougars, but it was definitely some shady stuff going on. It was like surround sound. All around my skull and off in the distance, they were all curdling in fear. It made me scared too. I took a second to ground myself and started running toward the east. Game time. Navigating the forest would have been impossible without my headlamp and machete. Still, progress was slow even with the paths I marked and cleared earlier. It was like the shrubbery had some magical miracle grow in them, and they covered my paths just as fast as I cut them down. When I made it to my east trap, I was surprised to see that the trigger mechanism wasn't pulled. I was tricked already, but I was prepared for a lure anyways. I hate the intelligent ones, because they always pull childish stunts like this, thinking they're smarter than me. I may not be a genius, but I'm good at what I do. I pulled out my handgun, closed my eyes, and listened. Then, with the slightest rustle in the leaves, jolted me back. I flipped around, aiming through the iron, and then I wasn't there anymore. I was a kid back in Arkansas, and I immediately threw up in my lap from the sheer dizzying spiral of what just happened. I tried so hard to remember what was going on, but it was like my whole life before that never happened, and it felt like a dream to me. It got to a point that all I could remember was the mantra I said when meditating. Don't trust what you know, what you believe, yourself. I said in a rushed whisper over and over. I was startled when I got a slug to the face in the middle of my rambling. "What is wrong with you, Mark?" said the man in the front driver's seat of an old Tacoma. "You little crap, you ruined my car." He threw more right hands at me until eventually pulling the car over to drag me out and started to beat me on the side of the road. The beating was a familiar taste I knew all too well. The salty sweat of a man. I pushed back in my mind palace far, far away from myself. My father. I tried to push him away, but my feeble body didn't have enough strength to fight back. I just ate every hit until a tooth cut through my bottom lip, and I felt my nose crack and bleed down my chin. He stood up in a grunt and exacerbated breath. "Today's the day, Mark." He took some deep inhalations. "You're really pushing me. I'll leave you out here if you don't suck it up." He walked over to the truck and cracked open one of the cores that littered the back seat. He started back over to me, well swigging it. What you gotta say, little man? Still lying on that dry pavement, I spit a hot, bloody loogie at his feet. Screw you, you freak. He got on top of me and really let me have it that time. Full swings and torn up knuckles driving my head onto the pavement over and over. When I started to lose consciousness, I began to have flashes of me in the forest, and something else on top of me, something slimy and wet, with claws and needle teeth. That's when I snapped out of it. I threw the thing off of me and was surprised to find just how light it was. About 90 pounds of gross muscle, contorted and amphibious. It reeked of mold and decaying meat. The Nemosith hissed at me and leaped away into a tree as I heard it bound across branches. You scared? I screamed in frustration. I let off a couple of shots, but none of them hit their mark as I was dizzy and tired. My equilibrium was off and my ears rang like a bomb exploded in my skull. It bounded away, and I knew I had to get back to the tower to reassess and check the damage before it attacked again. The journey back was daunting. I stumbled all over the place and kept hearing my father in my head, yelling at me, telling me things, whispering to me to keep secrets, terrible secrets, the ones I'm in therapy for. When I finally made it back, I checked the mirror to find I indeed suffered a real beating. Broken nose, black eyes, cut on the bottom lip, definitely a concussion. The only new things were the small pinpricks nesting around my scalp. The monster tried to burrow its way through my brain just like Eddie. It almost got me good. Bringing my dad out like that was the real pain. And when I started to think of him, my anxiety spiked. I shot up and cut down the stairs to the entrance of my lookout, boarded up the entrance, then sat in a corner and took deep breaths trying to get rid of my panic. Ever since I couldn't re-up my Xanax prescription, I've had to just suck it up and deal with the panic attacks myself. When I finally started to feel a bit better, I began to realize that taking away my only escape route might not have been such a great idea. But in my mind at the time, it was the only way to ensure I was going to be left alone. The only way to stay safe. I took some deep breaths in that musty corner and even ate a granola bar. It hurt like hell crunching on it, but I had to chew on something. I heard that animals only eat when they're safe, so if you eat when you're panicked, then you could trick the mind into relaxing. This time it only helped a little. "Come on out, Mark," I heard from outside. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw my dad making rounds about the lookout. He was holding an axe and was bigger than I remember, wearing that same stupid hat and filthy plaid shirt, looking like a lumberjack. His hands and body were still dirty and bloody from the beating he gave me earlier. His voice boomed with authority. "You can't hide forever, little boy." Panic mode was in full effect. That's what he used to call me when he... I leaned out the porch and with gritted teeth started shooting at him. But I was still just as bad of a shot as earlier and couldn't reach him. The gun ran out of bullets, so I ducked back into the cabin and began reloading when I heard thunderous cracks coming from below me. They shook the tower and threw me off balance, knocking me on my butt. The bastard was going to take the whole thing down. Sure enough, the remaining logs couldn't withstand the weight of its cabin, and my big fat butt fell down with it. I saw the sky quickly revolve into earth and back again as I tumbled through the air. The cabin slammed into the mountainside facing up, but at a steep angle, shattering all the windows. The impact made the fridge fall from above me, crushing my left arm between it and the floor. I screamed out in pain as it slid off me and fell through the windows and down the cliff. My arm was twisted up. Compound fracture through the elbow and nicked an artery too. Blood was gushing out 3 feet in spurts that were in sync with my heartbeat. I quickly tore off my shirt and wrapped it. That's when the cabin started sliding. The Nemo Sith started clawing at the barricaded door above me, cutting through the plywood like butter. It shrieked like a cougar and pounced as we both skied our way down the slope. Trees and rocks pushed past us, tearing up the cabin and splitting it into pieces like grated cheese. I rolled around a wall to avoid getting hit, but the thing kept coming at me with ferocity, swinging its claws around with no purpose or care. I managed to shoot it a couple times in the body, and milky fluid bled from it like a punctured balloon. Smash. We made it to the bottom, and when the wreckage settled, all was silent. I stood up, and through double vision and fog, I saw my dad again, approaching slowly with arms out wide. "You know I love you, buddy. I love you so much." Hunched over, half dead and completely done with that, I said, "You love me now?" and emptied the rest of my magazine into the filth. He doubled over and flexed back, arching his spine into a bridge that melted the skin off and became his true form, a slimy, nasty, overgrown frog thing. It screamed one last time, rattling its lungs out until slowly catching a hitch in its breath, gurgling on fluids. It slowly died there, melting into the wreckage like bubbly acid. It took some time getting back to my truck. Even more time to drive to a hospital and convince the staff I was just in a car wreck. You live and you learn. I called Beth in the hospital and let her know what happened. She's ecstatic, and invited me over for dinner once I get out. I begged her to make me some cheesecake, and she did me one better to offer a ride from the hospital with Rick and Eddie too. I'll be taking a short break from hunting to heal up and recharge. In the meantime, I'll be taking any offers or bounties people have, and setting up a schedule. My shrink is pissed that I missed my last appointment and told me no excuses when I explained the whole almost dying thing. He told me to just keep journaling and make sure to come back to the office once I'm out of the hospital. That guy. Something still bugs me though. When I first came down that tower, I didn't just hear one cougar. They were everywhere. Maybe just another sick trick. Anyways, till next time, Mark. It started again last night. 3 soft knocks at the door, just after 2 a.m. The exact same as it's been for the past 4 nights. Knock, knock, knock. I know I shouldn't open it. I know what I saw. But when you hear children's voices whispering your name in the dark, when you see their silhouettes pressed against the frosted glass, it's hard to pretend you're not just a little bit hopeful that it's all been some horrible mistake. The Wilson kids died 5 years ago. Their house caught fire in the middle of the night. Faulty wiring, they said. By the time anyone noticed the smoke, it was already too late. The family was trapped upstairs. The whole street woke up to their screams. I did too, but I didn't do anything. I stood in my window and watched the flames eat their house alive. I told myself it was too late, that by the time I got outside, I couldn't have helped anyway, but I heard the knocking even then, faint and desperate, just like now. I think it came from inside the walls. The parents' bodies were found together, melted into the charred bed frame, but the kids, they were never found. Just tiny handprints on the floorboards leading to the front door. That door had claw marks in it, deep ones. The cops thought wild animals had gotten in, but wild animals don't knock. Last night I finally opened the door. There was no one there, but the knocking didn't stop. It was coming from the walls now, and it's not just knocking anymore. They're talking. I can hear them behind the drywall, giggling and whispering, scraping their fingernails along the inside. They're moving, room to room, closer. They keep asking why I didn't help them, why I watched, why I did nothing. I tried to tell them I was scared, that I didn't know what to do. They didn't like that answer. I don't think they're going to leave this time. My lights are flickering, the air smells like smoke, and I see tiny handprints forming on the walls beside me. They're inside the house now, and they're not alone. I didn't sleep. After the handprints appeared on the wall, I locked myself in the bathroom and turned the lights off. I don't know why. Like, hiding would help. I sat in the bathtub with a knife I found in a drawer. Like, that would make a difference. They didn't try to break in. They didn't have to. Around 3:15 a.m., the whispering started again. Not just the kids this time. Another voice joined them. Deeper, slower, like it was learning to speak. The children sounded afraid of it. I heard one of them say, "He's awake again." Then silence. And then the scratching started. Not at the walls this time. From inside the mirror. I swear I'm not crazy. I watched as a small crack formed in the center of the glass, spiderwebbing outward like pressure was building behind it. Something moved on the other side, just beneath the surface. I turned away, and when I looked back, the mirror was normal again, but my reflection wasn't. It blinked when I didn't. I left the bathroom when the sun came up. I thought maybe daylight would push them back, like they were tied to the night somehow. But now things are different. It's not just the walls, it's the photos too. Every picture in my house with people in it. Friends, family, even old school photos. All of their eyes are gone, scratched out, but there's something worse. The Wilson kids are in them now, standing in the background, watching. One of them is behind me in the picture on my fridge, smiling. I'm in the photo too. I don't remember taking it. I don't remember ever smiling like that. I left the house around noon and drove until my gas light came on. Parked in some diner lot, an hour out of town. I've been sitting here for hours. I don't know where to go. But they do. There's a note under my windshield wiper, written in crayon. Why did you leave the door open? I didn't. I swear I closed it. Unless... No. I locked it. I know I did. I'm going home now. I have to. I think whatever was with them got out. I think it's wearing me, pretending to be me. And if that's true, then who's been driving my car for the last 10 minutes?